Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little grotesque. You're stepping into the boots, well, the pointy leather ones, of a plague doctor during the Black Death. Yes, that Black Death. The pandemic that wiped out somewhere between a third and half of Europe's population in the mid-14th century. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this, but don't worry, we'll have fun along the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean it, no pressure. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. I like knowing where and when you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the edge of the city in early spring, just as the rains are turning muddy roads into slush, and the wind carries a faint sour odour you can't place. A rider galloped ahead 2 days ago to announce your arrival, and now you stand on the stone bridge that leads into the town. Its name, irrelevant. What matters is the silence, where there should be the clamour of carts, the chatter of merchants, the clang of blacksmiths. You hear nothing, just the creak of wood, a distant dog barking once, and a chill rustling through the trees. You glance down at your bag of medical supplies, then at the sealed letter from the town council that promises you payment, housing, and exclusive burial rights. Oh good, you're the new plague doctor. Your presence is both a relief and an omen. Behind the heavy gate, faces peer out from shuttered windows, hopeful and horrified. Your arrival means two things. Someone finally agreed to come, and it's already too late. A small group of masked men approach to greet you, though greet might be a strong word. They wear rough robes and carry long poles, quarantine officers most likely, though they don't say much. They escort you through the main gate and into the city proper, where the streets are littered with abandoned baskets, fruit now covered in white mould, a toppled cart left to rot in the gutter. You step around a dead chicken, at least you hope it was a chicken, and instinctively breathe through your sleeve. The smell hits you fully by the time you reach the square. It's not just the waste or the rot, it's sickness itself. The sour sweet stench of fevered bodies, the iron tang of blood, the acrid reek of lye and smoke from recently burned homes. You've never smelled anything like it. It coils around you, seeps into your cloak and clings to your nostrils like it has fingers. You realise with a jolt that this is your new normal. A crier reads your name from a scroll, mispronouncing it naturally, and a crowd gathers. A few women cross themselves. A man yells something about sorcery. You're led up the stairs of the town hall, a half-crumbling structure with tapestries that haven't been cleaned in years. Inside, a handful of officials await, masked with cloth soaked in vinegar. They look healthier than most, but you notice the grey rims under their eyes and the way they keep their hands tight inside their sleeves. They're not untouched, just not dead yet. The mayor speaks. You understand your duties, you nod, and your voice is more hoarse than you'd like. To treat the sick, document the dying, and contain the pestilence, he offers a tight-lipped smile, and stay within the walls. You sign your name on the contract. It's scrawled in Latin, with clauses about access to infected homes, fees paid upon death, and an unsettling clause about property inheritance in lieu of currency. Basically, if the town can't afford to pay you in gold, they'll pay you in what the sick leave behind: furniture, clothes, land even. Assuming you live long enough to collect, you're handed keys to a small townhouse near the apothecary's shop and told you'll begin tomorrow. They advise you to walk the streets early, before the heat of the day sets the city steaming, as they put it. The last plague doctor lasted less than a month. As you step back out into the late afternoon haze, you finally catch sight of it. The first body. Propped against the side of a shuttered bakery, mouth agape. Skin dark with bruising and rot. No one moves to bury him. No one cries. Just another figure added to the tally. You hesitate for a moment before moving on. A fact you may not know. The classic beaked plague doctor look. Not quite your invention, actually. That weird bird mask style wouldn't become common until a few decades later, pioneered in France and Italy. Right now, you wear something more like a leather hood with slits for your eyes, and a layered cloak soaked in camphor oil and lye. Still grotesque, still terrifying, and still not particularly effective. You do, however, carry a wooden staff, for distance, for examination, and occasionally for warding off people who get too hopeful that you're a miracle worker. Quirkily enough, some towns believe you are cursed. Plague doctors often became associated with death omens. People would say, "When the bird comes, the soul goes." You're like a walking funeral procession. Not the best PR. There's debate even now about whether plague doctors helped or harmed the situation. Some scholars argue you were essential, brave souls documenting symptoms, attempting crude containment. Others say you were largely ornamental, little more than bureaucrats in masks checking boxes as people died. Maybe you're a bit of both. Noble intentions, cursed tools, and no real understanding of what you're up against. As you settle into your narrow, dim apartment that night, you light a tallow candle and examine your gear. Blunt surgical tools, bottles of rose water, crushed herbs, and your ledger. A journal of the dying. Your first entry is simple. Just the date, your name, and a single line. There are already too many. You try to sleep, but sleep won't come easily tonight. The walls creak. A dog howls. Somewhere nearby, a woman weeps quietly, as if trying not to be heard. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was a mistake. But it's too late now. You're inside the gates, and the plague doesn't open them for anyone. You wake before dawn to the muffled toll of a bell, one long low note that seems to hang in the air like fog. A death bell, your first of many. You lie there for a moment listening, trying to summon the nerve to get up. The room is freezing, the hearth went out hours ago, and your breath plumes in the grey light filtering through the small window. You pull the rough wool blanket tighter around your shoulders and stare at your mask where it rests on the chair across the room. The beak looks back at you like a silent dare. You know you'll have to put it on soon. After dressing, if you can call layering stiff linen under a heavy leather robe dressing, you eat a hunk of dry bread and drink water that tastes faintly of rust. Outside, the streets are quiet except for the occasional scrape of a shutter swinging loose, or the sharp caw of a raven circling overhead. You fit the mask over your face and fasten the straps, adjusting it until the eye holes sit just right. Inside the beak, you've packed dried rose petals and a hasty mixture of herbs, thyme, lavender, sage. Anything to soften the onslaught of smells. The mask is hot, stifling. With every breath, the damp scent of crushed petals mixes with your own sweat and breath. Visibility is limited. The glass discs over your eyes fog slightly as you step outside. Still, the mask has a strange power. As you walk down the main street, people retreat into doorways, and those too weak to move simply turn their faces away. You are no longer a man. You're a symbol, something between hope and horror. Your first stop is a house marked with a red X on the door. You pause. There's no movement inside, but the door is slightly ajar. You push it open with your staff. The smell hits instantly. Feces, rot, that strange sweetness you're already learning to dread. Inside, the air is thick, unmoving. A woman lies in the corner, bundled in rags, eyes wide and unblinking. At first, you think she's dead, but then her chest rises shallowly, barely. You kneel beside her, careful not to let your robes touch the stained floor. Her lips are cracked, her face sunken, and on her neck, yes, there it is. A blackened swelling the size of a plum. A bubo. You try to speak to her, to ask her name, but she doesn't answer. She only stares past you. You take her pulse, weak and fast. There's little you can do except note the symptoms and leave a small vial of herbs nearby. It's mostly symbolic. You drop a piece of dried orange peel into the corner of the room and leave. It's supposed to purify the air, according to one of your older texts. You're not convinced, but it's something. Next house. Same mark. This time, a man and his 2 sons. The boys are already gone. Their small forms covered in rags near the hearth. The father is delirious, mumbling about angels and salt. You record it. You always record it. Your ledger grows heavier by the hour, filled with names, ages, symptoms, odd quotes, and occasional sketches. The swelling is usually in the groin or armpit. Sometimes it bursts, leaking black pus. Other times it hardens and never opens at all. No one can say which outcome is worse. By mid-morning, the city is waking, such as it can. You hear coughing from windows, the groan of carts carrying bodies, the sharp orders of guards patrolling the district walls. A boy runs past you barefoot, kicking up dust and scattering rats. You freeze, watching as the rodents dart into a pile of refuse. You've seen more rats than you expected. They're everywhere, nibbling at trash. Disappearing into holes, sometimes crawling over the feet of the dying, you file the thought away. No one's sure what role they play, if any. Some towns believe they're just another symptom. Others claim they're sent by the devil. You pause at a fountain to wash your hands with vinegar and scrape your gloves clean with a knife. The water is low, the basin fouled with algae and dead leaves. A woman nearby, veiled in black, whispers a prayer as she pours a small vial of oil into the water. You move on quickly. You've learned not to linger when people start praying. Around noon, you stop at a merchant's home, richly appointed once. Tapestries, polished silver, the smell of spices lingering in the air. But the man himself is little more than a husk on silken bedding. His servant opens the door for you and refuses to come inside. You find the merchant awake but terrified, clutching a book of psalms and weeping. You ask him how long he's been ill. He tells you he hasn't. He's not sick at all. He's hiding from it. You examine him anyway. No fever, no swelling, just fear. You tell him to stay inside, close the shutters, burn incense. He presses a gold ring into your palm before you leave. For protection, he whispers. You don't return it. By the time the sun begins its descent, you've visited 13 homes. 6 are confirmed sick, 4 already dead. 1 is empty except for a crib and a blood-stained rag. You don't ask, you don't want to know. A strange fact you pick up that afternoon. Some people are hanging herbs in their chimneys, not garlic or lavender, but crushed wormwood and mint tied with red string. When you ask why, a young girl says it's to keep the shadows out. Not spirits, not plague. Shadows. You don't press her. As the shadows lengthen, you return to your quarters and strip off your gear with slow, deliberate movements. The mask comes off last, and the cool air stings your face. You stare into the mirror, expecting to see exhaustion or despair. But mostly you look empty, as though the mask took your face with it. There's debate among modern scholars about whether the plague mask actually offered any protection. Some think the herbs and vinegar in the beak helped a little, filtering airborne particles. Others argue it was just a placebo, medieval PPE with no real efficacy. Either way, it becomes your second skin. You only remove it in private, and even then, reluctantly. You sit at your desk that evening, writing out the day's notes by candlelight. The ledger is nearly a quarter filled already. You pause once to listen to the sounds outside, more bells, more weeping, and somewhere faint music. A violin, perhaps, or a hallucination. Hard to say. Your dinner is a bowl of broth and a hunk of cheese gone slightly soft. You eat anyway. Hunger dulls your sense of taste, and nothing tastes right here anyway. Not anymore. Before bed you clean your tools, light a bundle of rosemary, and say a quick prayer, not because you believe it will help, but because it feels wrong not to. Then you lie down, listening to your own breathing slow and even beneath the thin blanket. You've survived one day, just 29 more until you outlast your predecessor. There's a knock at your door before sunrise, not a polite one. A loud, urgent pounding that rattles the loose wood in its frame. You lurch out of bed and yank your robe around you, heart already pounding. Outside, 2 town guards wait, breathless, helmets askew. One has blood on his tunic. The other is holding a scrap of parchment that's been crumpled and dampened with something dark. Ink, maybe, or worse. Urgent case, one of them mutters, as if there's any other kind in this city. You throw your tools into your satchel with practiced haste, still wiping sleep from your eyes as you fasten the mask back over your face. The guards don't speak on the way. They walk fast, cutting through alleyways you haven't explored yet, the kind where the houses lean together like they're conspiring. A dog trots alongside for a while before disappearing into the mist. You finally arrive at a small chapel nestled between crumbling tenements. The wooden door is ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Inside, it's chaos. A nun lies on the floor, writhing and moaning, her habits soaked with sweat. A second is trying to hold her down, whispering prayers that devolve into panicked sobs. A few feet away, a priest lies slumped against the altar, motionless, his face partially veiled by his cassock. You don't need to examine him closely to know he's gone. You kneel beside the nun. Her pulse races like a trapped bird's. Her eyes flicker to yours, pupils wide, and she begins muttering fragments of a psalm, one you recognise, though the words are warped by fever. She reeks of incense and bile. You lift her sleeve, and there it is again. The telltale swelling, a dark, painful mound near her elbow. Skin stretched tight. You ask the remaining nun how long they've been sick. She says 3 days. You ask why no one came for help. She says they were trying to pray it away. You don't say anything, just open your satchel and prepare your tools. There's no medicine here, only rituals, and even those are collapsing under the weight of reality. You apply a hot compress made from boiled thyme and vinegar. It's one of the few treatments you know that doesn't seem entirely useless. She screams as it touches the bubo, a sound that echoes sharply in the chapel's stone walls. You whisper some words you hope are soothing, though the mask makes them sound distant and hollow. The other nun watches you work, clutching a rosary so tightly her knuckles turn white. After stabilising her, you order the guards to quarantine the building and send for a gravedigger. The priest needs to be removed before his rot spreads further. You leave behind a sachet of herbs and a few words of warning. If either nun shows bleeding from the mouth, they're likely beyond saving. You hate saying it, but you can't stop saying it. It's your new refrain. On the way back through the city, you pass a group of children playing in the dust with wooden dolls. They're filthy, barefoot, and clearly unsupervised. One of them wears a crude paper mask shaped like a beak. It's a mockery of yours. Flimsy, smiling, painted red around the edges. They point and laugh as you pass, calling you the Death Crow. You don't respond. You don't blame them. In fact, you wonder how long before one of them turns up on your doorstep, lips blue and eyes glazed. You hope never, but you've learned better than to hope too loudly. Back in the market square, you stop by a makeshift tent that serves as your supply post. The apothecary there is a hunched man with fingers permanently stained brown from mixing salves and tonics. He doesn't speak much, but he always has something strange. Today he offers you a bottle of aqua vitae, distilled wine turned medicine. It's mostly for bribery or numbing pain. You take it, along with more vinegar, a handful of dried mint, and a strange talisman he swears wards off sky poisons. It's shaped like a fish. You don't ask. By midday, the city is louder than you'd like. Bells toll from multiple towers. Too many deaths for the standard rhythm. Smoke curls into the sky from the crematorium on the edge of the Jewish quarter. There's a long line at the burial registry, and tempers are short. You walk faster, mask tilted slightly downward, not wanting to meet anyone's eye. You're already seen as part healer, part executioner. No need to add public spectacle to the list. Your next stop is a small home near the river. A boy answered the summons this morning asking for help for his father. You find the man sprawled on a straw mat, eyes sunken, arms limp. He's in the final stages, his tongue is blackened, his skin already cooling. The boy watches you from the corner, too quiet for a child. You check the man's pulse anyway. Nothing. You close his eyes and prepare to leave, but the boy tugs your cloak. "What do I do now?" he asks, voice barely a whisper. You want to say something comforting. You want to tell him he'll be taken care of, that someone will come, but you know better. So you kneel, pull a coin from your pouch and place it in his palm. "Now buy bread, don't drink the river water, and stay away from rats," you say. He nods, clutching the coin like it might vanish. As you step outside, you wonder how long he'll last. A curious bit of trivia you remember as you walk back. In some cities, plague doctors weren't even real physicians. They were butchers, barbers, or men with basic literacy, who were hired simply because no one else would come. Some of them were criminals, offered a pardon in exchange for their service. Others were scholars who saw it as a chance to study disease firsthand, morbid curiosity dressed as duty. There's debate even now about how effective these doctors were. Some argue their presence slowed the spread of disease. Others claim they did nothing except panic the locals and spread it faster. What's undeniable is that most of them died. You try not to dwell on that part. The day ends with you collapsing onto a stool beside your desk, arms sore from carrying bodies and supplies, eyes gritty from hours of squinting through fogged glass. You take off your mask and let the evening air touch your face. It's not fresh. It's never fresh. But at least it's not filtered through the stench of death. You write out the day's notes slowly, hands trembling a little more than yesterday. You pause at the line for the boy's father and write, "No surviving kin," before scratching it out. You write nothing instead. The boy deserves at least that. As night falls, the wind picks up, and somewhere nearby someone begins to scream, a raw animal sound that goes on far too long. You don't get up. You stare at your hands, cracked and stained, and try not to imagine who that scream belongs to. You've made it through another day. Barely. The mask is still yours to wear, For now. The city wakes slowly the next morning, like a wounded animal reluctant to move. You hear it before you see it. Low moans behind shuttered windows, the coughs of old women echoing from alleys, a single baby wailing from somewhere deep in the tenements. You roll out of bed feeling like you never really slept. The blanket on your cot smells faintly of smoke and sweat, and you notice your boots are still damp from yesterday. You slip them on anyway. No one has time to dry anything anymore. Your morning routine is mechanical now. Vinegar rinse for the hands, fresh herbs for the mask, linen underclothes tied tight with twine to limit exposure, leather overcoat stiff with age and soot. The mask goes on last. The moment you fasten it, your world narrows. The outside world becomes a foggy picture framed in dusty glass, tinted with the tang of time, and filled with your own breath echoing back at you. Your first visit of the day is unexpected. A city official has died. Someone high up, though they never give you names. You're escorted by 2 guards in steel breastplates that reflect the early light in harsh glints. They march you through streets that have been hastily swept, as if they think you'll be impressed. You pass homes with painted shutters, and even one with a marble column at the entry, but the silence is the same. No servants bustle about, no chatter spills from the kitchens. Rich and poor alike are too busy dying to keep up appearances. The body lies in a guest room that probably cost more than your entire house. Thick carpets muffle your footsteps as you enter. The man is propped upright in a chair beside the hearth, his face frozen in a half grimace, one hand clutching a goblet of wine. You examine him carefully, swelling under the arms, blood at the mouth. A single dark lesion across the neck that looks almost like a burn. You write it all down in your ledger, even sketch the lesion for future reference. Something about it unsettles you. It's not a classic bubo, and there's a strange burned smell in the room. You wonder if it's from the expensive candles nearby or something else entirely. His wife stands in the hallway, flanked by 2 young women. Daughters, you assume. They're wearing perfumed kerchiefs over their mouths and avoiding your gaze. The wife wants to know how soon he can be buried. You tell her plainly, within the day. The city ordinance allows no longer, and if he begins to swell or burst, he will be burned instead. She nods once, tears shining but unshed. You don't offer comfort. You don't do that anymore. You move through the city with practiced speed. Today the alleys seem narrower, the sky lower. The sun is out, but it doesn't warm anything. It only bakes the rot into the air. You visit a bakery that hasn't opened in a week and find the owner collapsed behind the counter, covered in flour and flies. His daughter is alive, just barely, hiding in the root cellar with a stale loaf clutched in her hands. She cries when you pull her out, not because you're there, but because she doesn't want to leave the dark. One of your house calls brings you to a family who has barricaded themselves in their attic. They lower a basket down from a window, with coins and a note inside. Tell us what to do. You shout instructions up at them like a street preacher. Burn damp clothes, air the rooms, sleep apart if they can. You don't know if it'll help. Probably not. But it keeps them from descending into full panic, and sometimes that's enough. The smell today is particularly vile. Even with the mask, it creeps into your nostrils and makes your eyes water. You pass a pile of dead rats in a gutter. Someone's attempted a makeshift offering, perhaps, or just got sick of seeing them dart between bodies. You poke one with your staff. Its belly is swollen, legs stiff. A thought flickers in your mind about the rats, about the fleas, about the way they spread through the city like water through cracked stone. But then the thought disappears. You don't have the energy to puzzle it out. You have too many dying to see. In the early afternoon you encounter something odd. A man seated in the street with a basket of leeches, shouting that he can cure anyone who pays in advance. He's dressed in yellow robes and wears a crown of garlic bulbs. Around him, a few desperate people stand in a semicircle, some with rashes, others just afraid. You watch from a distance as he places leeches on a woman's neck and mutters a nonsense prayer. When she collapses from fever moments later, he simply moves on to the next. You approach and tell him to stop. He looks you in the eye, well, in the mask, and says, "I've saved more than you ever will, Birdman." You don't argue. You just record his name and ask a guard to remove him. Later, back in your quarters, you open your ledger and flip back through the pages. The entries blur together, names, symptoms, drawings of swollen armpits and discoloured tongues. the occasional annotation where something strange happened. You notice you've started writing small notes to yourself in the margins. One says, "Tried sage poultice again, still useless." Another simply reads, "Too many children today." You pause on the page from this morning, the wealthy man with the burn-like lesion. You've seen a few of those now, symptoms that don't match what you were taught. Not the textbook bubonic signs, but bleeding, lung collapse, sudden death without warning. Pneumonic plague, perhaps, a different strain, no one knows. No one can agree. Some say the plague is changing. Others claim it's punishment, that the disease takes new forms depending on the sins of the city. You don't believe in that kind of thing, except, sometimes, late at night, you think maybe they're right. A fringe rumour has started circulating among the poorer districts. People are saying the plague only kills those who breathe deeply. They're whispering that shallow breathing keeps the poison out. You watch as people try to hold their breath when they see you, mothers teaching their children to breathe like mice. It's nonsense, of course, but you don't correct them. If it gives them hope, let them have it. Hope is rarer than coin these days. As you sit beside your window that evening, peeling an overripe pear and watching the smoke rise from yet another burn pit, you think about what a strange job this is. You're not healing anyone. Not really. You're a collector of last breaths. A note-taker for the end of the world. No one thanks you. Most avoid you. A few try to attack you in their grief. But still, each morning you wake up and put the mask back on. You write one last note in your ledger before blowing out the candle. No new cases among the guard. Possibly due to isolation? You're not sure, but it feels good to end the day with a question instead of a death. Then you crawl into bed and lie still, listening to the wind rattle the windows and the distant sound of footsteps, fast, panicked, and then gone. You wonder if tomorrow will be better. It won't. You wake up to the sound of horseshoes clattering on the stones outside your window, fast, sharp, urgent. Not the gentle clop of a supply cart or the uneven stumble of a plague wagon, but the full gallop of someone riding hard. You pull yourself out of bed slowly, muscles aching in places you didn't know you had. The window's small and cloudy, but you can just make out the banner on the rider's shoulder. Black and gold, the crest of the city council. That never means good news. By the time you've dressed, strapped on your beaked mask and stepped outside, a breathless courier is already pounding on your door. He doesn't speak, just hands you a folded letter and waits as you break the seal. It's from the council. Your employer, technically, though no one ever says it out loud. They've assigned you a special consultation. You're to report immediately to the council chamber for instructions. It's signed by 3 men, none of whom you've met in person. That's how it works here. The powerful stay hidden. You walk quickly through the city's narrow arteries, stepping over puddles of sludge and sidestepping half-collapsed doorways. The stench this morning is thick and almost metallic, like boiled coins and old meat. Smoke hangs in the air from a nearby cremation site. A man is shouting somewhere about the end of days, but he's drowned out by the familiar ringing of the death bell. It tolls twice, then once more a few minutes later. You wonder what the new pattern means. Maybe someone important died. The council chamber sits at the top of a steep hill, walled off from the rest of the city by a wrought iron gate, and guarded by men with faces too clean to be trusted. The building itself is beautiful in a way that feels disrespectful. Polished floors, tall windows, tapestries that still hold colour. It smells like lemon oil and wine. You almost don't want to touch anything. Inside, they hand you a new contract. This one's even stranger than the first. It promises a generous bonus upon completion, but the task itself is vague. You're to visit an estate just outside the city walls, a rare permission, and attend to a patient who has fallen into grave distress. No further details, no name. Just a sealed box of supplies to take with you and a servant to guide the way. You don't ask questions. You never do when gold is involved. Instead, you grab your tools, your ledger, and a few extra satchels of herbs. The box they gave you is heavier than you expected and locked tight with a strange iron clasp. The servant says nothing during the journey, just walks ahead with a lamp in one hand and a dagger at his belt. You wonder if the dagger is for defence or to keep you in line. You decide not to test it. The estate is perched on a wooded hill surrounded by dying fruit trees and a stone wall covered in moss. It looks peaceful, almost idyllic, until you step through the door. Inside, the smell hits you instantly. Not the rot of the city streets, but something more private. Damp linen, spilled wine, fever sweat soaked into velvet. The hallways are dim, the shutters drawn tight, and the servants move like ghosts, their faces pale, their eyes averted. One leads you to a grand bedroom, where the patient lies on a silk-draped bed, writhing under a fur blanket. You approach slowly. The man, middle-aged, once handsome, is clearly dying. His skin is flushed and glossy with sweat, and his breath comes in ragged bursts, but it's his eyes that catch you, wild, unfocused, darting around the room like he's searching for something just beyond his reach. You pull back the blanket and see immediately that this is no ordinary case. His body is covered in small black lesions, not just in the armpits or groin, but across his chest, legs, even his face. Some have burst, others are hard as stone. You touch one through your gloves. It's hot, fevered and pulsing. You ask the head servant how long he's been like this. 3 days, she whispers. We've tried everything. Fasting, prayer, bloodletting. She looks at you then, eyes wide with hope. You'll save him, won't you? You don't answer. You open the box from the council. Inside, to your surprise, are surgical instruments, rare herbs, and a small book wrapped in oilskin. You flip through it. Handwritten notes in Latin, some of which you recognise, others that feel borderline occult. One entry is circled in red, a tonic of crushed pearl, rose water, and camphor to prolong breath in late-stage cases. It's laughably expensive and entirely theoretical. But you prepare it anyway. You work for hours, apply salves, clean wounds, drain a few lesions, gently, carefully. The man groans and twitches but doesn't wake. You administer the tonic drop by drop and hope, absurdly, that it does something. The servants watch in silence, hands clasped like mourners. By dusk, he's stable, not better, just not worse. You record his symptoms in your ledger, noting especially the odd black spots. You've seen them before, but never this many, and never this fast. You close the ledger and ask to stay the night. The head servant agrees. They give you a guest room that smells like lavender and fresh straw, an almost cruel comfort after so many nights on a straw mat in your city quarters. That night, you don't sleep well. You dream of hands reaching up from mass graves, pulling at your cloak, whispering your name in voices you've never heard. You wake drenched in sweat and stumble to the basin. As you wash your face, you catch your reflection in the mirror. You look like someone else, not quite dead, not quite you. A curious footnote. In some towns, plague doctors were required to write daily reports, not just of medical progress, but of unnatural occurrences, moaning from empty houses, visions, dreams, symptoms that didn't match the books. The council believed the plague was more than physical, it was spiritual too, a kind of darkness that needed to be watched. There's still debate about this idea. Some scholars think it's proof of early psychiatric understanding, others see it as religious paranoia. But as you sit in this luxurious guest room staring at a patient whose body refuses to follow any known pattern, you begin to wonder, what if they were right? At dawn, the man's condition is unchanged. You seal your notes, close the box, and prepare to return to the city. The servant says the council will contact you if there's further need. You step outside into a quiet morning, the trees around the estate rustling gently. For a moment, it almost feels like the plague isn't real. But as you descend back toward the city gates, you see the smoke rising again, thick, black, and full of memory. You return to the city just after midday, your cloak heavy with dew and your eyes still stinging from the smoke. The guards at the gate wave you through with barely a glance. They've stopped checking anyone who wears the mask. You could be anyone under there, anyone desperate or mad enough to take this job, but they don't care. The sight of the beaker's enough. They pull their scarves higher, step back and avert their gaze like you're contagious by proximity. Maybe you are. Back inside the city walls, the streets are louder than usual. Not joyous. Nothing like that. Just active. You follow the noise to the market square where a huddle of townsfolk has gathered around a raised platform. A man stands on it, arms outstretched, shouting about salvation. He's shirtless, covered in scratches, blood seeping from his back in thin red rivers. A flagellant. You've heard of them before. Pilgrims who believe self-punishment can purify the body, protect it from the pestilence. This one is leading a chant flanked by others in robes, all carrying whips with iron tips. They beat themselves in rhythm, calling for repentance. The crowd watches with rapt horror, like they're witnessing something halfway between a miracle and a breakdown. You don't stop to watch. You've seen what comes next. When people get desperate, they look for someone to blame. A heretic, a sinner, a foreigner, and often, eventually, a doctor. You press on quickly, the sound of lashes and cries fading behind you as you head toward your next visit. A house near the old tannery. You know this one will be bad before you even knock. There's a certain smell to it, a thick soup of decay and urine and desperation. The door creaks open without resistance. Inside, you find a woman lying on the floor, curled into herself, motionless. Her skin is flushed purple, her lips cracked, and her legs covered in black streaks like vines. Gangrene. You don't need to check her pulse. She's long gone. But then you hear it, a soft cough from the next room. You follow the sound to a child, no more than 7, hiding behind a cupboard. He's feverish, eyes glassy but still alive. You kneel, trying to speak gently through the mask, though your voice comes out hollow. He flinches anyway. You reach into your satchel and pull out a small piece of sugared ginger. You used to keep a few for yourself, but now you give them away without thinking. You press it into his hand and tell him you'll help. He doesn't respond, but he doesn't run either. You clean the boy up as best you can, wash his face, check his lymph nodes. There's swelling. Not severe, not yet. You apply a cloth soaked in rosemary water and wrap it around his neck. It's all you can do for now. You scribble in your ledger and tell the neighbours to check in on him, though you know they won't. They're afraid. Everyone is. On your way back, you pass the tannery itself, long abandoned, the door now hanging on one hinge. A dog scurries out, muzzle dark with something you don't want to identify. The building stinks of old hides and river mud. You make a mental note to suggest burning it. Too many places like that become nesting grounds for rats, and worse. Your next stop is a wealthy merchant's house, not because he's sick, but because he's paid for a preventive consultation. You hate these visits. They always ask the same thing. How can I keep my family safe? Can we escape to the countryside? Should we burn juniper in the nursery? You give the same answers. Wash with vinegar, avoid crowds, boil your linens, and no, the plague doesn't care about your title or your vault full of coins, but they never listen. They always nod solemnly and then whisper about a planned escape by carriage or a hidden estate in the hills. You mark the visit in your ledger and take the coin, though it feels greasy in your hand. A strange little fact passes through your mind as you walk. During the height of the plague in some cities, it became common for people to carry posy balls, hollow orbs filled with aromatic herbs. People believed holding them to their nose could ward off disease. You've seen some made of silver, others carved from wood, even one fashioned from bone. The wealthy merchant had one resting on his desk, right next to his quill and ledger. Its scent was clove and pine, surprisingly pleasant, almost made you forget where you were. Back in the slums, you encounter a family burning their own home. The father stands shirtless, face smeared with ash, while his wife and children watch from a distance. You ask him why. He says the house was cursed, that 3 of his children died in the same bed. He's not wrong to burn it, honestly. Sometimes fire feels like the only real medicine left. But when he asks if they'll be safe now, you hesitate. You tell him it was a good step. You don't say the truth, that it probably won't be enough. There's a rising tension in the city today, something in the air that isn't just the usual rot and fear. People are growing restless, supplies are running thin, burial crews are overworked, and every day more homes get marked with the dreaded red X. Some start marking their neighbours' doors in the dead of night, trying to shift the danger away. You've seen it happen. It never works. The new order is posted at dusk. No one is to leave the city without written permission from the council. The gates are to remain sealed. Anyone found aiding an escape will be punished. How, it doesn't say, but the implication is clear. You're all in this together now. Or more accurately, you're all trapped. That night, you eat dinner cold. The firewood is running low and you don't want to waste it. You sip a bit of the aqua vitae from the bottle the apothecary gave you. It burns, but it dulls the edges too. You stare out the window at the darkened street, watching the shadows flicker under torchlight. You see a figure dart across the alley, too quick to be a rat. Maybe a thief, Maybe someone trying to run. Maybe just a ghost of someone who didn't make it. As you write out your final notes for the day, you include one detail that sticks with you. A girl, no more than 10, seen carrying a blackbird in a cage. She told you she was keeping it because birds couldn't get sick. They fly above the clouds, she said, where the sickness can't reach. You almost told her it wasn't true, but what's the point? You close the ledger and sit for a while, letting the quiet wrap around you. There's a strange comfort in the routine of it all. Even if the routine is soaked in death, you survived another day. You kept breathing. You kept the mask on, and for now, that's enough. You wake to the distant sound of retching, hoarse and human, unmistakable, and you know the day has already begun without you. The sun hasn't quite crested the rooftops yet, but the city doesn't wait. You grope for the edge of your robe, pull it over your shoulders, and sit on the edge of your cot, letting your eyes adjust. You slept too long. The light has shifted, and your joints ache from lying still for once. You allow yourself a single luxurious moment of stillness, then the mask comes down from the hook, back into the nightmare. Out in the street, the air is heavy with humidity. It clings to your cloak, seeps through your gloves, makes the leather stick to your skin. The city smells worse today, like raw sewage and vinegar, with a sweet edge that turns your stomach. You adjust the herbs inside your mask. Too much lavender left from yesterday. It's gone musty, but you settle for it. You have little left to work with. Your first call is a house in the Weaver's Quarter, a narrow, crumbling structure that lists slightly to one side, as if it's too tired to keep standing. Inside, a family waits. Mother, 2 sons, and a grandmother who rocks slowly in the corner, singing a lullaby to no one. The patient is the father, stretched out on a table once used to sort cloth, now serving as a makeshift bed. His chest rises and falls in short, wheezing bursts. You ask how long he's been sick. The mother wipes her face with a sleeve and says 2 days. It looks like pneumonic plague, no buboes, just the cough. The room is hot, sticky, and you can see the illness hanging in the air like steam. You ask the family to step outside, which they do reluctantly. The grandmother doesn't move, just keeps singing, so you leave her there. You lean over the man and try to check his pulse, but his hand jerks up, grabbing your wrist with a sudden strength that startles you. He tries to speak, but blood comes up instead. It splatters against the front of your mask and drips down in slow streaks. You step back, heart pounding. You've seen this before. This is the kind of plague that kills in a day, maybe less. You do what you can. Burn herbs in a small dish beside the bed, wrap a linen soaked in rosewater around his chest. It won't help, not really, but the motions matter, to him, to you. You whisper a few words that sound almost like comfort, then retreat from the house with slow, deliberate steps. Outside, the mother asks if he'll live. You give her a long look and say nothing. Next door, another case. A young apprentice, black spots blooming across his legs like ink stains. He tries to act brave, asks if he can still work in the dye shop. You almost laugh. You tell him to lie still, drink water, and wait. You hand his brother a bundle of cloth soaked in wormwood. They won't know what to do with it, but it gives them something to hold on to. By midday, the heat is suffocating. The city bakes under a hazy sky, the sun a dull disk behind layers of smoke and dust. You stop at a fountain near the market square. The water is low and thick with algae, but you rinse your gloves and splash your face with vinegar from your flask. A group of children watches you from across the square, whispering and pointing. One mimics your walk with exaggerated steps, arms out like wings. Another holds her nose and giggles. You can't blame them. You must look like death itself, because in many ways you are. Later you visit a home where someone's tried an unusual cure. The walls are smeared with goat's blood, streaked in elaborate spirals. A clay bowl sits in the centre of the room, filled with ashes and burnt herbs. The patient lies nearby, unconscious, a wreath of garlic wrapped around his neck. You kneel, check for a pulse, and feel none. The air in the room buzzes with flies. His wife stands in the doorway, face slack, eyes rimmed red. We followed the ritual, she says. You nod, gently close the man's eyes and make a note. Folk remedy, ineffective. You've been writing that phrase more often lately. One of your more peculiar visits today involves a woman who insists she's found a cure. Onions, sliced and placed around the room, changed every day. They absorb the sickness, she says. Her husband lies in bed, visibly worsening, but she shows you proudly how the onion slices have turned black. It means it's working, she says. You want to tell her the blackness is mould, not magic, but she looks so hopeful that you just nod. You suggest she open a window at least, let the sickness out. You've started to notice how often people invent treatments out of desperation. Boiled frogs placed under pillows, sleeping on different sides of the bed each night, painting crosses on ceilings with wine. Some make sense in a way. Others feel like grasping at wind, but none of them work. You've seen that over and over, and yet you still offer your own. Sage compresses, garlic poultices, tonics brewed from wine and mint. You know they don't cure anything, but they give people something to do besides wait to die. A historical note drifts through your thoughts as you make your way back toward the river. During the plague years, one popular treatment involved drinking crushed emeralds dissolved in vinegar. Royalty swore by it. Merchants paid fortunes for a few flakes of green dust. Now, you've heard of people using crushed glass as a substitute, cutting their throats from the inside in the name of hope. You've confiscated 3 such bottles this week alone. There's an ongoing debate among modern historians about why so many of these treatments persisted. Some say it was cultural inertia, the same way people keep old charms or lucky coins. Others think it was sheer psychological need. If you can do something, even if it's nonsense, it feels like power. You lean toward the second. These people need to believe they're not helpless, even if it's a lie. You end your day at the church infirmary. It's quiet, dim, filled with the rustle of thin linens and the occasional cough. A few friars still work here, bandaging sores, offering prayers, feeding broth to the dying. You respect them. They're some of the only ones who haven't run. You check on a patient you saw 3 days ago, a butcher named Hugo. He's still alive somehow, thinner, weak, but breathing. You feel a flicker of something you haven't felt in days. Hope. You don't let it stay long. You return to your quarters just after sunset. You strip off the mask and cloak slowly, careful not to drag any of the day's filth into your small sanctuary. You wash with vinegar and rainwater. The skin on your hands is cracking again. You'll need to wrap them tonight. As you write in your ledger, you pause for a long moment over a blank line. Then you write, Hugo still breathing. Nothing more. You don't want to jinx it. Before bed, you light a small candle and stare into the flame. You think about the man with blood at the mouth, the boy with the ginger candy, the woman with her onion charms. You wonder how many of them are still alive. You wonder if the mask protects you at all, or if it's just another false comfort. You wonder most of all, how many more days your hands will keep steady. You're halfway through a bite of stale bread the next morning when you spot it. A movement on the wall across from your door. A rat, big as a cat, bold as a drunk, dragging what looks like a strip of cloth through the mud. You freeze. It pauses too, little black eyes glinting like it knows you're watching. Then it scampers off into a gap beneath a broken stoop, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. You chew the rest of the bread slowly. It's hard, and the edge scrapes your gums. You think about the rat the whole time. The rats have become impossible to ignore. They're everywhere, on rooftops, in wells, under floorboards. Sometimes you catch them in broad daylight, clustered around a body like it's a banquet. You've even seen them nestled in wagons of the dead, warm and well fed. The city doesn't notice them anymore, or pretends not to, but you do. They've been following the sickness since the beginning, like little black shadows. You head out, the mask already heavy on your face, the leather still damp from yesterday. You carry more vinegar than usual. The apothecary warned you yesterday that supplies are running low. Everyone wants vinegar now. To bathe in, to rinse their clothes, to keep in shallow bowls by the windowsills. It's the new holy water. The first house today is just outside the Smiths district. A cramped 2-room dwelling built from old ship planks. Inside you find a woman in her 20s, curled up on the floor with a thin blanket pulled over her head. Her sister answers the door. She woke up with a fever, she says, eyes darting nervously, and black spots on her legs. You nod, and she lets you in. You kneel by the sick woman. She's alert, just barely, and whispers that she feels cold even though her skin is burning. You examine her legs and see the markings, small, blackish bruises, almost like someone pressed fingertips into her skin and held too tight. They're new. And they're spreading. You make a mental note and ask about her contact with others. She hasn't left the house in a week, her sister insists. We've been careful. You want to believe her, but the rat you passed on your way here tugs at your thoughts. You remember the cloth it was carrying looked like a bedsheet, or a rag. You leave the sisters with a bundle of mint and a cup of diluted aquavitae. It's all you can do. The sick woman smiles weakly as you leave. You don't smile back. On your way to the next stop, you pass an old man crouched in a gutter, muttering to himself and smashing rocks together. You think he might be one of the ones who cracked from the inside out, the ones who saw too many funerals and not enough survivors. You toss him a heel of bread as you pass. He doesn't thank you, just begins smashing it with the rocks. The next home is worse. 3 bodies already, wrapped in sheets and stacked like firewood in the back room. The man who called you stands over them with his sleeves rolled to the elbow and a wash basin at his feet. "They were gone when I woke up," he says simply. You check the sheets, mother, father, younger sister, all cold, all showing signs of full-body mottling, and the man? He's sweating, trembling slightly. You pull your herbs closer and tell him he needs to isolate. He laughs bitterly and says, "From who?" You mark his door with a charcoal X as you leave, not because the council told you to, but because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember where the death started. You stop at a bakery to rest your feet and catch your breath. The oven hasn't been lit in days, but the owners, an old couple with matching silver hair, still sweep the steps and smile at passers-by. The man offers you a crust of something tough and nutty. You take it, and in return, you give them a few drops of camphor oil. "To rub on the wrists," you say, "and keep the windows open." The woman nods, but her eyes are already glassy. You notice the spots on her husband's hands. You say nothing. Around mid-afternoon, a runner finds you in the street. A boy no older than 10, out of breath, and too thin. He says a doctor is needed in the southern quarter. "Big house, green shutters," he says between gasps. "They're saying the plague got into the walls." You follow him there, through twisting alleys and across a flooded street where the water smells like blood. The house with green shutters is indeed big. Too big for this part of the city. Inside it's chaos. Servants running in every direction, one girl crying in a stairwell, a boy vomiting into a decorative vase. You're led upstairs by a housemaid who won't make eye contact. "The master's son," she says. "He coughed blood." You find the boy in his bed, surrounded by silk curtains and the remnants of a feast. Grapes, a half-eaten pheasant, a silver goblet. He's small, pale, and panting like a hunted animal. His mouth is rimmed with red. His pulse is faint. You check his chest. No swelling, no bruises, just the rattling cough. You open the windows and tell the maid to bring vinegar water and to move everyone from the room. She hesitates. "His mother won't like that," she says. You glare at her through the mask until she nods. You stay with the boy longer than usual. Maybe it's the setting. Such ridiculous opulence, now stained by sweat and blood. Maybe it's the way his hand reaches for yours like he thinks you're something more than a man in a mask. You whisper that he needs to keep breathing, that you'll come back tomorrow. He nods. You both know you're lying. As the sun begins to sink behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the filth streaked stone, you walk home slowly. You pass a pile of rats that someone has arranged like a warning. 3 of them nailed to a door, tails tied together in a knot. A rat king. You've heard of these. Real bizarre things where rats become entangled by tails, filth, and blood, stuck together until they die. People treat them like omens. You take a step back and stare at the display. You can't tell if it was found or made. There's still no consensus on the rats. Some scholars insist they were the carriers, vectors of the fleas that spread the plague. Others argue the timing doesn't match, that fleas wouldn't have acted so fast, that maybe it was airborne. Maybe it was in the grain, maybe it was divine. You've stopped caring. The rats are here, and so is the sickness. That night you return to your quarters, light a single candle and sit at your desk. You write down the strange bruise pattern on the sick woman's legs. You sketch the rat king. You note the boy in the silk bed, the father with no one left to isolate from, the couple still pretending to bake bread. You finish with a line you don't usually write. The city is tired. You lean back in your chair, rub your temples, and think about the rat you saw this morning, the one dragging the cloth. You wonder if it found what it was looking for. Your eyes open before the sun rises, stirred not by dreams, but by the creak of the wind pressing against the warped wooden walls of your quarters. There's a coolness in the room that wasn't there yesterday, a slight chill that clings to your fingers and sneaks under the doorframe. You lie still for a moment, breathing softly, listening to the sound of the world outside. It's quiet, not peaceful quiet, but hollow, as if something has been removed from the air. You rise, wash your face with vinegar water, and dress with the same motions you've repeated every day for weeks. The robe is heavier than usual, still damp from yesterday's sweat, and the mask, when you finally strap it over your face, feels tighter. You're not sure if it's shrinking or if your skin is simply more raw than before. Either way, you step outside and into the pale morning light, where the city feels more ghostly than ever. The streets are nearly empty. Only a few silhouettes move through the mist, all of them hunched or hurried. A child runs past barefoot, his nose bleeding, chased by no one. 2 guards stand by the main gate, arguing in low tones, their halberds crossed. A baker's cart sits abandoned, the loaves pecked apart by birds who seem braver than usual. The rats are still here too, of course, slipping between cracks and under steps, bold and quiet. You pass one that stops to look at you. You stare back, and for a fleeting second, it feels like you're both just survivors, trading glances before returning to the business of persistence. Your first call of the day is a midwife's home. She's not sick, yet, but she's called you for something different. They're still giving birth, she says, arms folded across her chest, eyes red from lack of sleep. You blink, startled. Of course. The plague hasn't stopped time. Life, stubborn and indifferent, keeps pressing forward. She leads you to a back room where a woman lies cradling a newborn, her body slick with sweat, her breath shallow. The baby is alive, surprisingly strong, its tiny cries piercing the still air like a signal flare. You check the mother. She's weak but not feverish. Not yet. Her skin is cool, her eyes lucid. She lost her husband 3 days ago, the midwife whispers, bled out trying to move a body. You look at the newborn again. It stares back at you with wide, dark eyes. You feel something unfamiliar twist in your chest. Not joy, not quite. Something adjacent. You offer the midwife a small sachet of herbs for the mother's bed, lavender and marjoram, and instructions for how to boil linens in vinegar. You know it won't stop anything if the sickness is already in her, but you leave anyway, pretending it might. As you step back outside, you catch the scent of something unusual, meat, charred and pungent. Following the smell, you come across a narrow street where a small crowd has gathered. In the centre stands a man roasting something over an open flame. It takes you a moment to realise what it is. A pig, whole and blackened, its eyes hollowed out, its skin crackling. The man turns it on a spit and announces loudly that this is the cure. Roast and eat, he says. The plague cannot live in smoke. People murmur, some believe, others laugh. You don't speak. You just watch as he slices into the meat and begins handing out hunks wrapped in old cloth. You make a note in your ledger later. Smoke-cured meat sold as prevention. Possible food poisoning risk. You spend the rest of the morning on house calls, 3 in a row. A man found choking on his own tongue, purple and gasping. A woman whose legs have gone stiff and whose eyes won't close. A child lying still with blood on her pillow and a wax doll clutched to her chest. You do what you can. Record symptoms, administer tonics, offer lies. The city is fading around the edges, like an old painting exposed to sun and rain. You notice how quiet the birds have become, how the bells toll without rhythm now, rung by whoever has the strength to pull the rope. Around midday you visit a home that leaves you shaken. A schoolteacher, recently returned from a distant village, has fallen ill. His symptoms are strange. His tongue is swollen, but there's no sign of lesions or fever. He claims he can see lights when he closes his eyes, flickering colours that speak in whispers. He's convinced it isn't the plague. Something else, he murmurs. Older than sickness. You test him gently, check his pulse, examine his throat. Nothing you recognise. When you leave, he smiles at you with cracked lips and says, "You'll see it too." You write the symptoms down carefully. Add a footnote. Possible delusion, or something new. Back on the street, a cart lumbers past, piled high with bodies. One slips off the side and lands in the dirt with a soft thud. The driver doesn't notice. You move to help, lifting the arm gently, feeling the stiffness of the joints. The body is a woman, middle-aged, still wearing earrings. You hesitate a moment, then push her back onto the cart and walk away. You don't have the energy to feel anything about it. In the late afternoon, you're summoned to the town square for what's called a public consultation. It's not a request. A nobleman has fallen ill, one of the council's cousins, or maybe a nephew. You arrive to find a crowd already gathered. They've roped off the area and built a makeshift stage on which the patient lies wrapped in blankets, eyes fluttering, mouth open. His family stands nearby, pale and furious. "Fix him," one of them hisses. You climb the steps slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on you. The nobleman is hot to the touch, his breath shallow. His lips are blue. There's no bubo, at least not visible, but the signs are there. He's dying. You turn to the family and say you'll do what you can. They don't thank you. Just step back like you're made of fire. You apply a tonic, wrap his limbs, whisper instructions to a servant, then you turn to the crowd and speak. Boil your water, burn your linens, do not share food, and if you feel the fever, stay away from others. It's a performance. You're not sure anyone hears you. But the council will be pleased. It looked official. That's all that matters. As evening falls, you return to your quarters and light a single candle. You're too tired to eat. Too tired to write. But you open your ledger anyway and scrawl a single line. They're still giving birth. You stare at it for a long time, until the candle gutters low. Then you blow it out and sit in the dark, wondering if the newborn from this morning will still be breathing tomorrow, wondering if, by some cruel twist, the rats will find her before hope does. You're called to the cathedral first thing the next morning. Not because of a death, though you find plenty of those there, but because the clergy have requested a meeting. They sent a page boy the night before with a handwritten note sealed in wax that bore the archbishop's insignia. It's rare for the church to summon you. Usually they look through you like you're part of the scenery. The masked figure pacing through their parishes, scaring children and offending the faithful. The bird-headed ghost in the corner pew, but today they want something. You step into the cathedral through a side entrance. The main doors are shut tight, bolted from the inside, the great hinges rusted with weeks of disuse. The air inside is cool, stale, thick with candle smoke and something older. Incense, dried flowers, the lingering scent of people who came to pray and never left. The pews are mostly empty now, scattered with torn hymnals and broken rosaries. Sunlight filters in through cracked stained glass, casting distorted saints across the marble floor, their faces warped and bleeding light. The archbishop waits near the altar, robed in crimson, flanked by two priests who look more like bodyguards than men of the cloth. He does not bow. Instead, he gestures for you to come closer, like you're being summoned to answer for a crime. You approach slowly, your mask clicking slightly with each breath. "We've had complaints," he begins, his voice deep and practiced, like it's been trained to echo, from parishioners who say your presence spreads fear, that your treatments are not godly. You resist the urge to laugh behind your mask. Not godly? Compared to what? Bleeding people in candlelight and stuffing their mouths with relics? He goes on, explaining that several of the clergy believe the plague is divine punishment, a scourge sent for the sins of man. That medicine is meaningless unless it comes through the hands of the holy. And yet, he adds, they still call for you when their sisters begin to cough blood. You respond calmly, evenly. You explain that you're not here to challenge the church, only to help those who ask. You don't argue theology. You don't argue salvation. You argue bodies, fevered and bloated, stacked and burning. The archbishop watches you, unreadable. Then he nods, slowly. "We will not interfere with your work," he says, "but neither will we endorse it. You walk your path. We walk ours." That could have gone worse. You leave the cathedral through the same side door and step into the bright morning glare. Outside, a group of women kneel on the steps chanting prayers in Latin. Some hold crucifixes. One rocks back and forth, whispering, "Protect us, protect us, protect us." They don't look at you. You descend the stairs and disappear back into the city like a shadow slipping beneath the doorsill. You spend the rest of the morning making house calls, 3 in a row, all hopeless. A baker's wife, lungs full of blood, a boy with lesions along his spine. An old woman who asks you to hold her hand as she dies. You do. Her fingers are cold, her grip surprisingly firm, like she's holding you in place as she slips away. You close her eyes when it's over. No one comes to collect her. By early afternoon, the city is louder than usual. A bell rings out. Not the death bell, but the city's main tower, tolling in long, deliberate bursts. You pause in the street, along with everyone else. People crane their necks. A few cross themselves. A woman beside you mutters, "Fire." She's right. A plume of smoke curls upward from the merchant quarter, black and thick and fast-growing. You follow the smoke until you see it, a cluster of buildings ablaze, flames licking through wood and cloth, turning shutters into ash. People are screaming. Some try to fight the fire with buckets, forming a crude line from the fountain. Others are running, grabbing belongings, dragging children by the wrists. You spot a man trying to carry his goat out of the alley. The goat looks entirely unimpressed. You push through the chaos to find someone in charge. A guard, helmet askew, tells you the fire started in a warehouse. Probably rats, he says, or oil, or candles, or all three. "The plague's in the walls," someone yells. "Burn it out!" There's a strange logic to it. Fire as a purifier, a final treatment. You watch as a shop collapses, its roof crashing inward with a dull boom that makes the ground shudder. Somewhere behind the smoke, a dog howls, sharp and high-pitched. You can't see it. You hope it runs. You don't try to stop the fire. What would you do? Pour vinegar on it? You stay long enough to make sure the sick are pulled from their homes, those that can move. Then you retreat, lungs burning from smoke, mask stinking of ash. Back in the quieter part of the city, the flames are just aglow on the horizon. That night, you're invited to dinner. It's rare, almost unheard of, but one of the council members has requested your presence. You're not sure why. You arrive at the home, which is almost laughably untouched by the plague. Marble steps, clean windows, servants who bathe regularly. You're ushered into a dining room where 6 men sit around a long table, all of them plump, powdered, and wearing perfumed scarves around their mouths. They gesture for you to sit. You do, still masked, still silent. They talk about the fire, about looters, about raising the quarantine walls. One asks what you've seen lately. You answer honestly. Death, rot, hallucinations. One man scoffs. Another raises an eyebrow. "Do you believe it's rats?" he asks. "Or air?" You shrug. "It doesn't matter. It's here." They offer you wine. You decline. They eat duck and cheese while discussing how much property is now available. You realise with a slow, sick twist that they're not mourning the deaths. They're calculating them, measuring them in gold and acreage. Death as an asset. You leave as soon as you can. Back in your quarters, you strip out of your cloak and mask slowly, fingers trembling slightly from fatigue. You light a candle and open your ledger. Tonight you write more than usual. You note the Archbishop's warning, the fire, the child with the blood-filled lungs, the old woman's last grip. You draw the skyline with smoke rising. You write, "They dine while we burn." Then you sit in silence, watching the candle flame tremble, wondering how much longer this story can stretch before it snaps. You begin your day not with the usual knocking at your door or a city page bearing instructions, but with a soft scratching sound. Barely audible, just enough to pull you out of a shallow sleep. At first you think it's wind, a loose shutter maybe, but as you sit up, you realise it's coming from just beneath the floorboards. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Like something burrowing. You lean down, ear close to the boards, heart suddenly heavier than your chest can manage. Then silence. Whatever it was, it knows you're listening. You dress slowly, already on edge. You wrap your inner linens tighter than usual, check the straps of your mask twice. The scent inside the beak today is juniper and mint, pungent and fresh. A rare luxury. You want the illusion of control. Outside, the city is quiet in that haunted way you've come to recognise. Not safe, just emptied, like it's waiting for the next horror to arrive. Your first visit is to the home of a notary, a man named Elias who sent a message by courier asking for assistance with urgent affairs. You arrive to find him not sick, not yet, but pacing in a room filled with stacked parchment and open ink bottles. His eyes are red, not from illness but from sleeplessness, and he motions for you to sit. You don't. "I've been writing wills," he says, "so many that I can't keep my hands steady. People lining up outside begging me to record their last words before they cough or collapse." He shows you a scroll as long as your arm, filled with names, requests, bequests. Gold to cousins, land to priests, instructions for burial, some grand, others humble. They believe if it's written down, he mutters, they won't be forgotten. He pauses, then looks at you, really looks, like a man staring at the last person who might remember his face. Do you know what they confess to me? He asks. All of them. Secrets, lies, lovers, regrets, as if I'm their priest. He laughs, but there's no joy in it. One man admitted to poisoning his brother's soup 30 years ago. Another wanted it recorded that he never loved his wife. A third left everything to a woman no one else knew existed. You ask him if he wants you to examine him. Not yet, he says, but soon. I think. You leave him with a bottle of rosemary water and instructions to air the room. As you step out, you see a woman on the street holding a folded will in one hand, a child in the other. Her face is calm, resigned. The child looks confused. You write in your ledger, Elias, notary, sound of mind, for now. Your next call is to a tailor's workshop where the seamstresses have taken it upon themselves to make protective cloaks. You find 3 of them cutting strips of wool, stitching thick hems, soaking each garment in vinegar before drying it in the sun. They show you their work like proud children, heavy robes, stiff and pungent. The cloth stops the sickness, one explains. You nod, flipping through the layers. They've even started sewing simple masks, just cloth triangles tied behind the ears. One of them offers you a new hood. You decline politely, but ask to buy 2 to distribute later. At midday, you pass the plaza near the gallows and find a man standing on a barrel, shouting about the devil living in the river. His robe is tattered, his eyes wild, and he claims that if people confess their sins and bathe in the filthy water, the plague will leave them. You watch as 3 men actually step into the river, thigh-deep in muck, arms raised, chanting. You make a note in your ledger. New ritual, unsanitary, dangerous, spreading quickly. Further on, you encounter a case that sticks with you. A widow, alone in a house too large for her, wearing her wedding dress as she lies on a couch near the fireplace. He died in this room, she tells you, motioning toward the hearth. I keep it lit so he doesn't feel cold when he visits. You nod and check her pulse. It's erratic. Fever is setting in. Her dress is stained with sweat, the lace stuck to her arms. You want to tell her to change, to cool herself, but you know she won't. You leave herbs on the table. She thanks you like you've given her a chance. You know better. A curious fact floats through your mind. During the worst of the plague, some people believed a house could be spared if its occupants performed confession through silence. They would sit in total quiet for days, hoping that saying nothing would protect them. Others would talk non-stop, repeating prayers or chants until they lost their voices, believing that if they never stopped, the sickness would pass them by like a wind that couldn't touch noise. Both methods, unsurprisingly, proved ineffective. There's scholarly debate now about whether those rituals were coping mechanisms or true belief. Some say they reveal the desperation of people with no scientific guidance. Others argue that they were a form of communal therapy, shared madness to help keep a grip on reality. You don't know which theory is right, but after watching the woman in her wedding dress talk to her empty fireplace, you understand both. As the sun begins to dip, the city grows noisier, not with voices, but with movement. You see more people dragging carts, throwing linens into pits, shouting instructions from balconies. It's as if the city has decided to wake up, not to heal, but to clean. You find yourself helping to dig a shallow grave in a courtyard, not because you were asked, but because the others needed a hand. No one speaks as you work. Dirt piles beside the hole. One man coughs into his sleeve, another mutters a prayer between gritted teeth. When it's done, they lay 2 bodies in and cover them with sheets and soil. You say nothing, just wipe your hands and move on. Your last visit of the day is to a tavern-turned-shelter. The innkeeper has boarded up the lower windows, converted the tap room into a dormitory, and begun serving a weak onion broth to anyone who can still hold a spoon. He asks you to examine one of the workers, a girl of about 15 who has collapsed in the kitchen. You find her shivering on the stone floor, her lips cracked, her arms dotted with black sores. She said her legs felt numb, the innkeeper mutters. Then she fell. You nod, kneel, check her breathing. It's shallow, but she's still here. You administer a small dose of wine-laced tonic and wrap her arms in cloth soaked with bitter herbs. It's not a cure, just comfort. You look up and see the innkeeper watching. She's all I've got left, he says. You nod once and leave quietly. That evening, back in your quarters, you wash your hands twice. They still feel dirty. You record the girl's name, the notary's list of confessions, the wedding dress, the river ritual. Each detail joins a growing record of a city unravelling in slow motion. You sit at your window for a while, watching the sky go from pale pink to a bruised grey. The moon rises behind a veil of clouds. Barely visible, a pale coin tossed into the heavens. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then silence. You whisper a quiet goodnight to no one in particular, then return to your cot and pull the blanket to your chin. You hope you'll dream of something else tonight. The bell rings early, long and low as always, but this time there's a rhythm to it. A pause, a second toll, then another. You recognise it now. Not a death announcement, but a burial call, a big one. It means the plague pits are being reopened. You rise without thinking, your body on autopilot. The sun is barely up, the air still heavy with night, but you know the streets will already be teeming with movement. You slip into your linen layers, cloak, gloves, mask. You pack your satchel with your tools, herbs, scalpels, rags, and charcoal. You add a clean scrap of cloth, just in case you find someone worth covering. That part never gets easier. As you step outside, the sky is a dull pewter, flat and exhausted. Clouds hang like bruises. The streets are slick with last night's rain, and the earth in the poorer districts has turned to black sludge. Mud sucks at your boots with every step. You can hear the carts before you see them, the wheels grinding through the muck, pulled by tired oxen and followed by men with shovels and faces like stone. A gravedigger waves when he sees you, his hand wrapped in burlap instead of gloves. He doesn't say good morning, no one says that anymore. You walk with the procession to the edge of the city where the newest pit has been dug. It's not a grave in any traditional sense, just a trench, wide and deep, hacked into a field once used for grazing. The grass is gone, trampled and dead. The scent hits you even before you reach the edge. Sweet, sour, something rotting beneath wet soil. It's the kind of smell that buries itself in your nostrils, clings to your mask and haunts your dreams. The bodies come one by one, some wrapped, some not. A man who still wears his butcher's apron, a girl in a blood-stained shift, a priest with arms folded, lips still wet with the last sacrament. You try not to look too long. You do your job, record names if anyone provides them, sketch unusual symptoms, note any cases that don't match the standard plague profile. You notice a boy with blackened fingernails and strange swelling along the spine. Not typical. You jot it down in your ledger. You wonder if it matters. No one is reading these but you. The diggers work without ceremony. They use long poles to push the bodies into position. One mutters a prayer under his breath every third corpse. Another whistles tunelessly. They are numb like you. You wonder how long it takes to become like that. Days? Weeks? Or just one bad afternoon? You kneel beside the edge of the pit to examine a woman who still has a necklace around her throat. Silver, delicate, clearly expensive. It must have belonged to someone before all this. Maybe her. Maybe she stole it. Maybe it was a gift. You consider taking it, but then a small hand touches your leg. You flinch. It's a boy. No older than 8. Mud streaked across his face. Hair matted. He's barefoot, shaking. "That's my mum," he says quietly, pointing to the woman. You stare at him, stunned. No one comes to the pits unless they have to. No one watches. You kneel beside him. "What's your name?" He says it, barely above a whisper. You write it down. You ask if there's anyone else. He shakes his head. You hesitate, then offer him the cloth from your bag. He kneels beside the body and lays it gently across her face. Then he stands and walks away without another word. The pit fills quickly. By noon, it's half covered in soil, and the stench is unbearable even through the mask. You step back and wipe your gloves clean, but the filth seeps through anyway. You've seen more than 30 dead today, and you know the day isn't over. You retreat into the shade of a broken barn nearby and sit for a few minutes, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light. There's no rest, not really, but sometimes hiding helps. You think back to something you once read, an old physician's record from a distant city where they'd tried to name each corpse before burial. They stopped after a week. Too many, too fast. Some historians debate whether these mass graves were disrespectful or simply practical. The answer, you think, is both. You do what you must, and then you try not to feel anything about it. You return to the city after a quick rinse in the river, The water is low and brackish, filled with dead leaves and worse, but it gets the blood off. Mostly. You visit the apothecary, who has set up a table outside to avoid letting the sick into his shop. He offers you a small flask of camphor and 2 bundles of dried rose petals. Last of the petals, he says. Maybe ever. You nod, pay in coin, and add the petals to your pouch like they're gold. In the late afternoon you make one more visit. A young couple whose home was spared by the fire. They sit in silence, both feverish, both beyond help. You kneel beside them and offer laudanum for the pain. The woman takes it. The man shakes his head. "We want to go together," he says. You nod, and he takes her hand. You don't try to intervene. You don't say a word. As you leave, you notice something scratched into the inside of their door. A symbol, crude and familiar. A circle with a line through it. You've seen it before, near homes where no one survives. You make a note. Circle marks spreading. No known origin. Maybe it's a superstition. Maybe a warning. Maybe nothing. The sun sets red, staining the horizon like a wound. You walk home slowly, passing shuttered houses and cold hearths. At a corner you see a girl singing to herself beside a pile of ash. You don't stop. You don't want to know why she's alone. Back in your room, you peel off the mask and collapse onto the cot. You don't bother lighting a candle. The ledger lies open, blank page waiting. You pick up your quill and begin to write. Names, numbers, a sketch of the circle mark, a note about the boy with the cloth, a question. What do we owe the dead? You don't answer it. You close the book and lie in the dark, listening to the wind move through the cracks in the wall. You wonder if the woman in the pit still smells like rosemary. You wonder if anyone will remember her name. You wake to shouting. Not the usual coughing or crying or the death bell tolling at dawn, but angry, disorganized yelling, too many voices overlapping and escalating. You sit up sharply, the blanket falling from your shoulders, and for a moment you're unsure if you're still dreaming. But then a crash jolts you fully awake. The unmistakable shatter of glass followed by a scream. You dress quickly, fumbling with the straps of your mask as your hands still tremble from sleep. When you open your door and step into the morning light, the street is chaos. A crowd has gathered in the square just outside the tanner's alley, maybe 30 people, maybe more. Some carry makeshift weapons, shovels, clubs, long poles with rusted nails at the tips. In the middle of the circle stands a man with his arms bound, face blooded, mouth gagged with a strip of cloth. You recognize him? Vaguely. He's one of the physicians, though you use the word generously. A man known for peddling miracle cures, oils, powders, even spells to those desperate enough to believe. And believe they did, until this morning apparently. Someone shouts that he's a fraud. Another yells that his herbs made their child sicker. A third throws a rock, striking the man's leg. The crowd howls like dogs, and more stones follow. You push through the throng, arms up, trying to calm them. "He's not the plague," you say, voice muffled beneath the beak. "He's just a man." But they're not listening. The fear in their eyes has turned inward and then exploded outward. Grief turned to fury. You reach him just as someone tries to light a torch. The man's eyes are wide with terror. You shove the would-be executioner aside and bark for the guards. It takes minutes, but they arrive. 3 of them, exhausted, ill-fed and reluctant. They break up the crowd with the flat ends of their spears, dragging the man away while the people shout and spit. You stand in the middle of the emptied square, breathing heavily, your pulse hammering in your ears. You've seen this coming. The longer the plague stays, the more people need someone to blame. Sometimes it's the foreigners, sometimes the poor, sometimes the midwives. Today it was a charlatan. Tomorrow? Could be you. You look down and notice someone's drawn a circle on the cobblestones, your mystery symbol again, this time traced in ashes. You kneel, run a gloved finger along its edge. Still no clue who's making them, but they're multiplying. Later, you visit a woman who claims she can see the blackness before it arrives. She says it flows into homes like smoke, drifting through keyholes and around doorframes. She describes it with eerie detail, says it has fingers, that it whispers in a language she doesn't understand. You check her for fever. Her temperature is normal, no spots, no coughing, but her pupils are dilated, and her skin is clammy. You wonder if grief can infect the mind the way the plague infects the blood. On your way back, you pass the fishmonger's street, now a shell of itself. Most stalls are abandoned, the cobblestones thick with scales and rotting wood. But at one corner an old woman still sells dried eels from a cart, calling out with a voice that cracks like brittle paper. No one buys. You pause and offer her a coin. She shakes her head and holds out a fish instead. Better protection than those silly herbs, she says. God made these slippery so evil can't stick. You don't argue. You take the eel and thank her. You place it beside your herbs in your satchel like an offering to absurdity. That afternoon, a group of desperate townsfolk gathers outside your door. They want medicine, not just for the sick, but for protection. To keep it away, they say. You distribute what you can. Mint bundles, rosewater, a few clove-studded oranges. One woman asks if she can pay with buttons. Another offers you a book of poetry. You accept both. You've learned to take anything. Sometimes it's less about trade and more about permission to hope. Just before sunset, you're called to the river again. A man has drowned, or been drowned. No one knows. You find his body floating near the shore, tangled in reeds, skin pale and bloated. His hands are bound, which makes you lean toward foul play. You help pull him from the water with the help of a mill worker, and beneath his shirt you find strange carvings across his chest. Symbols, some you recognize from alchemy texts, others that look like nonsense or desperate art. You write them down in your ledger, draw a rough sketch and make a note. Drowned man, ritual markings, unknown cause. You burn his shirt. Back in town, word spreads quickly. Some say he was a heretic. Others claim he summoned demons. A few insist he was a healer silenced for knowing too much. The truth, as always, is unreachable. A strange story reaches your ears near the end of the day. A man in the northwest quarter claims he's immune, that the plague cannot touch him. He lets people cough on him, touch him, even drink from the same cup. So far, he's alive. Curious, you visit. You find him lounging in a chair outside his home, sipping wine, shirt unbuttoned. He greets you warmly, like an old friend. I haven't fallen ill, he boasts. Not once, not even a fever. You ask what he's done differently. He shrugs. Garlic, maybe, or clean living, or maybe I'm just chosen. You examine him. Perfectly healthy. No signs of exposure. Could be luck, could be early, could be something else entirely. You leave, unsettled. Immune, maybe, or maybe just not yet. That night, you return to your room and find a note slipped under your door. No name, just a scrap of parchment with one sentence, written in a spidery hand. The plague does not come for the guilty. You read it twice, then burn it. You sit with your ledger open, the candlelight flickering wildly, casting strange shadows that seem to move even when you don't. You write down the day's events, the attempted execution, the blackness with fingers, the bound, drowned man, the eel, the false immunity. You draw the symbol again. You write. They want justice, but no one knows what justice looks like anymore. Before bed, you stare at the ceiling and try to remember the last time someone laughed. Really laughed. The kind that shakes the body and makes the eyes water. You can't recall. You try to imagine what would cause it now. Nothing comes to mind. Outside, the bells are silent, but your ears keep hearing them anyway. There's a man at the gate trying to leave. You see him before anyone else does. Early morning, long shadows stretching across the cobblestones, the city barely stirring. He's on horseback, saddlebags packed, cloak drawn tightly over his shoulders. There's no subtlety to him. He rides like someone who believes in speed more than stealth. The guards catch him before he even makes it to the outer post. By the time you approach, they've pulled him from the horse and shoved him to the ground, shouting orders over each other as he scrambles to his knees. You recognize the man, a minor merchant known for selling vinegar and apples, both wildly overpriced. You've seen him at council gatherings lurking in the back with a ledger in one hand and a false smile on his face. "I have a pass," he yells, waving a piece of parchment in the air. It flutters like a moth, torn and stained, clearly forged. One guard grabs it, squints at the seal and tears it in half. The merchant curses and reaches for his pouch. That's when they draw swords. He stops moving. They drag him back into the city. No one says where he'll go next. The tower? A cell? A ditch? Doesn't matter, he won't be leaving. You linger for a moment, watching the gate as it swings closed again. Iron against stone. That sound sticks in your ribs like a cough that won't go away. There's something final about it. Each time it shuts, the outside world grows further away, like a memory being erased in real time. You return to your rounds, the morning already warmer than it should be. The first stop is a butcher's shop when no one answers the door. You knock twice, then push it open. Inside, the smell of old blood and spoiled meat coils around your mask. The counter is clean, too clean, and there's no sign of the owner. You step through the back room and find him slumped beside the fire pit, his arm resting against a meat hook like he fell asleep mid-preparation. Except, he's not asleep. You know that before you kneel beside him. His skin is waxy, lips tinged with blue. On the wall above his head, written in something brown and streaky, are the words, "It was already inside." You don't touch the body. You just record what you see and quietly leave, closing the shop door behind you. Outside, a cat watches from a nearby barrel, eyes half-lidded and unbothered. You nod to it, as if sharing a private joke. The cat blinks once, turns, and disappears into the alley. Your next visit takes you to the edge of the quarantine zone, one of several now layered like rotting petals across the city. The walls have been reinforced with beams and posts, guarded by men whose uniforms are beginning to fall apart at the seams. They stop you only briefly. The mask is all the identification you need. Inside the zone, the air feels heavier. You always notice it. Not a smell exactly, but an atmosphere. People here don't talk unless they have to. Their windows are closed even in the heat. Laundry hangs like silent flags of surrender. You enter a home with a red X freshly painted on the door. Inside, a family waits quietly. A man, his wife, 2 daughters, all of them pale. The mother has a handkerchief pressed to her lips, stained with red. The older daughter holds her sister's hand like a lifeline. You examine them one by one. The father is still healthy, nervous but whole. The girls are both early in symptoms, low fever, light bruising. The mother is the worst. You know she won't last more than a day or two. You tell them what to do, but you already know what will happen. The father will try to care for them. Then he'll get sick. Then the girls will be alone. As you leave, the younger daughter tugs your cloak. "Are we bad?" she asks. "Is that why we're sick?" You shake your head slowly, unsure if she can even understand your answer through the mask. "No," you say softly. "It's not your fault." She nods, as if she wants to believe you. You write her name in your ledger and underline it twice. Back on the street, you encounter another symbol. Not the circle this time, but something new. An eye, roughly drawn in chalk with lashes like sun rays. You stop and trace it with your glove. A warning? A blessing? Someone's idea of art? You don't know. You add it to your notes anyway. In the afternoon, you pass a group of men hauling stones across the square. They're building another wall, not to keep people out, but to seal off a portion of the city entirely. "Too many cases," one explains, wiping sweat from his brow. "We'll leave them food. If they survive, we'll let them out." You ask how many people are inside. He shrugs. "Dozens, maybe. Hard to count. No one wants to knock." You don't knock either. Instead, you make your way toward the church infirmary, where a friar waits for you at the entrance. He looks exhausted, pale, and not entirely sober. "We've had a case," he says, "but it's different." That word makes your stomach tighten. He leads you to a side room where a patient lies motionless, his body curled inward like a question mark. There's no swelling, no bruising, no cough, just bleeding, from the eyes, the nose, the ears. The friar tells you he collapsed suddenly, mid-prayer, and hasn't woken since. You kneel beside him, check his pulse. It's fast, panicked, like he's still running from something in his dreams. You examine the blood. It's dark, thicker than usual, clots around the mouth. You've seen strange variations before, but this one is new. You ask about exposure. The friar says he hadn't left the church in days, hadn't touched anyone, had been eating only preserved bread and watered wine. So unless it's the Eucharist itself, he adds bitterly, I don't know what else it could be. You stay longer than you planned. Try everything you can, herbs, tonics, even a bloodletting, though it accomplishes nothing. The man never wakes. When you leave, the friar thanks you and asks for more salves. You promise to bring some tomorrow, knowing you probably won't have any left. That night, as the sky darkens and the air grows cooler, you walk back toward your quarters through streets that are becoming less familiar by the day. New markings, new boarded windows, new silences. You pass a woman kneeling beside a well, whispering into it like it's listening. You don't interrupt. You pass a man burning a pile of clothes. He doesn't look up. You pass 3 boys chasing a rat with a stick, laughing like it's a game. Back in your room, you remove the mask and pour yourself the last of the vinegar wine. It tastes like rotten fire. You open your ledger and write down the man with the bleeding eyes, the sealed quarantine zone, the girl who asked if she was bad. You sketch the new eye symbol and write beneath it, "Something is watching." You close the book and sit in silence for a long while. You think about the merchant at the gate, the fear in his eyes, the way the guards barely flinched. You think about the locked door to the outside. You wonder, quietly, how many more will try to escape, and when, eventually, it will be your turn to try. By the time you step outside the next morning, the air feels different. Not colder exactly, but charged. Like the moment before lightning, when the sky pauses and listens. Clouds hang low and close, blotting out the sun and muting the colours of the city to shades of grey and brown. It hasn't rained, but everything is damp. Your cloak clings to your skin, and your mask smells of yesterday's vinegar and crushed mint, now soggy and sour. You tighten the straps anyway. There's work to do. Your first visit is already waiting on your stoop. A young man slouched against the wall, clutching his arm like it might fall off. When you get close, he lifts his sleeve without a word, revealing a blister the size of a coin, black and ringed with angry red. It's shaped like no bubo you've seen before. No swelling, no pus, just raw, inflamed skin that radiates heat. "I didn't touch anyone," he mutters, voice shaky. "I only carried water from the well." You bring him inside and sit him on a stool by the hearth. There's no fire, just the cold smell of old ash. You clean the wound with a vinegar-soaked cloth, and he flinches so hard he nearly knocks over your satchel. You hold him steady, then open a small jar of crushed yarrow and ginger, mixing a paste as you speak. "Did anyone else use the well?" he shrugs. "Everyone. No one else I know looks like this, though." You apply the paste, wrap the arm in linen, and send him home with instructions to rest and avoid the water if he can. He thanks you, barely audible through clenched teeth, then disappears into the mist. You sit down for a moment afterward, staring at the remaining jar. You've seen boils, buboes, blackened limbs, but this is something else. A new version of the plague, or just another symptom the text forgot to warn you about. Later, you cross the bridge toward the textile district, where the buildings grow closer together, leaning like old men whispering secrets. There's a house here, notorious now, where 5 people died in a single night. No one's gone near it since. You're not even here for them. You're here for the house next door. A woman with a fever and a swollen eye that she insists was caused by smoke, not sickness. You knock. She opens the door herself, blinking at the daylight like a startled owl. Her eye is grotesquely puffy, red-rimmed, oozing slightly. You examine it from a distance, ask her questions, where she's been, who she's spoken to. She insists again it was smoke. "From the chimneys," she says, gesturing vaguely to the other house. "The bad one." You know better. You wash the eye with salt water, leave her with a small bottle of balm, and write a clear note in your ledger. Infected, but in denial. Danger to neighbours. As you step outside, you glance at the abandoned house next door. The shutters are closed, the door nailed shut. But still, you feel eyes behind the slats. As the day drags on, your visits start to blur. A man with bleeding gums. A girl whose fingers have turned blue, though her heart still pounds fast. A nun who hasn't spoken in 3 days but sings lullabies in her sleep. You treat them as best you can. Wrap limbs, apply oils, offer lies. You've become an expert at lying. You're lucky it's mild. It looks better than yesterday. Rest will help. But the symptoms are growing stranger. Some patients have no buboes at all, just aches, fevers and hallucinations. Others collapse without warning, their bodies stiffening within hours. There's no pattern anymore, or if there is, you've lost the thread. You pause in an alley to write down 3 cases you just left, and all you can think to say is, "Nothing matches." Then you underline it. You take a detour past the old mill to visit a man who, according to the guards, won't stop screaming. You find him tied to a post in the middle of his own courtyard, eyes wide and rolling. His mouth is foaming, and his legs tremble like a baby deer's. When you get close, he tries to spit on you. One of the guards laughs nervously and says, "He started chanting this morning, says he saw the plague, says it has a face." You don't get much from him. Just more nonsense, something about a woman in black robes, her hands dripping with oil, stepping from the walls at night. His skin is unmarked, no fever, no signs of infection. You suspect he's broken from fear, not sickness. Still, you wrap his hands to keep him from hurting himself and ask the guards to take shifts watching him. They nod, but you can tell they won't. He'll be alone by nightfall. As you return toward the central district, you catch sight of a strange procession. 3 figures dressed in red robes, faces hidden behind cloth, walking in silence down the street. One carries a bell, but he doesn't ring it. Another carries a jug, sloshing with something dark. The third scatters crushed herbs from a pouch as they walk, trailing leaves behind them like breadcrumbs. No one dares approach. You stand at a corner and watch as they pass. No words, no banners, just the rustle of cloth and the soft shuffle of feet. You want to follow them, but don't. You're not sure if they're healers or madmen or both. At sundown, you visit a boy in the South Quarter whose symptoms are textbook. High fever, groin swelling, dark spots along the spine. He's quiet but alert, and his mother sits by his side holding a damp cloth to his head. She doesn't ask you to save him. She just asks for a blessing. You place a sprig of rosemary under the boy's pillow and say a few words. Not a prayer, not really. Just something soft, something that sounds like peace. The boy smiles at you just briefly. It's the first smile you've seen in days. Back at your quarters, you peel off your mask and dump the herbs into a basin to soak. The scent rising from the water is foul, old and fermented, but somehow comforting. You sit beside it and close your eyes for a moment, breathing in through your nose for the first time all day. Then you pick up your ledger and begin to write. The man with the strange boil, the procession in red, the eye woman who blamed smoke, the boy who smiled. You jot down a phrase that keeps circling your mind. The plague is no longer consistent. You pause, then add a second line beneath it. Or maybe it never was. Your candle sputters as the wind kicks up outside. Somewhere a door slams. You glance toward the window, nothing but mist. You listen, just to be sure. No footsteps, no voices, just the whisper of wind, and somewhere far off, a bell that rings once then goes silent. You've barely stepped outside when a guard finds you. He's young, out of breath, and stained with something that looks suspiciously like dried blood. "Doctor," he pants, bending over with his hands on his knees. "They want you for the night watch." You blink at him from behind your mask, waiting for more. "Tonight," he says again. "Curfew patrol. The council's orders." You consider refusing. You have patience, a ledger to finish, more vinegar to boil, but he's not really asking. And you know how these things go. Refuse once, and next week your quarters might accidentally be reassigned to someone more obedient. So you nod slowly. "Where?" "North Quarter," he says. And then, as if it explains everything, the wild part. You spend the morning tending to your usual rounds. A carpenter's apprentice with peeling fingertips. A midwife coughing blood into a bowl of cold porridge. A father dragging his son through the streets, desperate for someone to tell him the swollen lump in his neck is just a bruise. You say what you must. You keep your hands steady even as your stomach turns at the smell of rot baked into sun-warmed brick. You administer what comforts you can, but you already feel the hours slipping away. The night watch waits. By dusk, the city changes. It always does. Streets empty faster, doors slam harder, candles burn lower. People try to act like curfew is just a rule, like it's about public safety. But you know better. Curfew is fear made visible. Fear of what the night might bring. Fear of who or what doesn't obey the rules. You meet your assigned patrol near the ruined grain house, a once busy hub now guarded by 2 men leaning on pikes and pretending not to notice the rats. There are 4 of you. The guard who summoned you, a grizzled man with a lantern and a glass eye, a woman who keeps muttering to herself in fractured Latin, and you, the doctor with the bird mask. No one says much. That's probably for the best. The first few streets are quiet. You hear the creak of the window shutters, the crackle of torches, the occasional muffled sob from behind a door. You stop twice to mark new plague homes, one with the telltale X, the other with that strange eye symbol, now scratched into the wood with something sharp. The woman with the muttering Latin crosses herself each time she sees it. As the sky fades from rust to ink, the real work begins. You find your first curfew violator crouched behind a barrel, teeth chattering, arms wrapped around a sack of bread. He's no older than 15, wide-eyed and skeletal. "I had to," he says, his voice hoarse. "We haven't eaten." The grizzled man raises his lantern and doesn't blink. "Back inside," he growls. "Now." The boy runs, clutching the bread to his chest like it might save him. The patrol keeps moving. You step around puddles that reek of sewage. You pass a house where someone is burning garlic on a plate, the smoke thick and spicy in your throat. A few windows glow with candlelight, illegal after dark, but no one's enforcing that tonight. Your group stops once to inspect a small body curled against a wall. A girl, no older than 10, no wounds, just still. You kneel, touch her wrist. Cold. But there's no plague, no blood. She died quietly, maybe of hunger, maybe something else. You cover her with your cloak and press a sprig of mint beneath her hand. The others don't speak. Around midnight you find yourselves at the edge of the northernmost district, called the wild part for good reason. Here the streets aren't just crooked, they're mazes. Houses lean into each other, and alleyways twist like tangled rope. There's graffiti everywhere, warnings, prayers, strange phrases written in tar. One reads, "Don't listen to the bell." Another, "Burn the herbs before they whisper." You're not sure what's more disturbing, the words, or the idea that someone thought them important enough to write in the dark. The muttering woman finally breaks her silence. "They say this quarter doesn't sleep," she whispers, "that things move here even after they die. You don't ask who they are. You just check your lantern and keep walking. You find a man wandering barefoot and naked from the waist down, his mouth moving silently. His skin is perfect. No lesions, no fever, but his eyes, empty. You try to speak to him, and he lunges, grabbing your mask with surprising strength. The guards wrestle him to the ground. He doesn't resist, doesn't even seem aware of what he's done. You sedate him gently with a tincture of wine and poppy, then tie his hands with cloth. No one wants to escort him home, so you leave him at the chapel steps, curled like a child. A curious fact surfaces in your mind. Some people believe that the plague drove not just bodies but spirits mad, that the souls of the infected roamed, confused and angry, long after death. This wasn't metaphorical, they meant it literally. Wailing spirits, angry ghosts. Some priests claim the Black Death was not a disease but a war, between heaven and hell, fought through your lungs and your skin. There's debate, of course. Scholars today argue that the stories of wandering spirits were merely the result of trauma, hallucinations, or collective hysteria. But you've walked these streets at night. You've seen too much to laugh at such things. By the time the sky begins to pale, your group is down to 3. The muttering woman vanished sometime after the 3rd hour. No one saw her go. You don't look for her. You don't mention her name. You finish your patrol near the Tanner's Canal, where the air smells like rot and the water glistens with filth. A body floats there, face down, caught against a broken dock post. No one retrieves it. You simply nod and mark the location in your ledger. The grizzled man with the lantern turns to you. You get used to it, he says, though his voice is hollow. If you don't, it eats you. You don't answer. You just head back toward your quarters as the city slowly stirs. Dogs bark, roosters crow, smoke rises. Another day begins like every other, quietly, as if hoping not to be noticed by the plague. You remove your gear, wash your hands twice in stale vinegar, and sit at your desk. You're too tired to eat, too tired to think. But you write. The girl against the wall, the boy with the bread, the words painted in tar, the man with the blank eyes, the vanished woman. You draw a new symbol this time, an open hand, palm up, bleeding from the centre. You write. The night is no longer empty. Then you blow out the candle and lie down, not to sleep but to wait. For tomorrow. For what's next. For the next knock at your door. You wake feeling like you haven't slept at all. Your dreams, if you had any, dissolved the moment your eyes opened. There's a dryness in your throat, a film behind your eyes, and your joints ache as if you spent the night wrestling the plague itself. You sit up slowly, boots still at your feet from the night before, mask hung on the chair like a sentry keeping watch over your shallow, unrestful sleep. It's still early, but the city is already loud. Voices echo down the alleys, chanting, rhythmic, and unmistakably human. Not the wails of grief or the moans of sickness, but something coordinated, loud, devout. You dress in silence, tug on your gloves, fasten the cloak and strap the beak in place. Your mask mutes the sound, but it's growing louder by the second. You step outside and there they are. Flagellants. A procession of them winds down the main street like a grotesque parade, barefoot and robed in white, the cloth already stained red at the back from self-inflicted lashes. They chant in Latin, loud and desperate, beating themselves with whips made of knotted rope and metal shards. Blood spatters the cobblestones. Some have crowns of thorns tied around their heads. Others wear wooden crosses on their backs, dragging them through the mud as penance. You stand at the corner and watch. People line the streets, some weeping, others crossing themselves, others still simply watching with empty stares. The leader walks with arms raised, shirtless, back shredded and raw. He shouts between chants, "The wrath of God is upon us, we must bleed for our sins." You've heard of groups like this, self-proclaimed holy men who travel from town to town spreading a gospel of pain. They believe the plague is divine punishment, and the only path to salvation is through suffering. They reject medicine, reject priests, reject doctors, especially plague doctors. You know better than to approach. But one breaks from the line. A young man, eyes wild and rimmed with red, rushes toward you, whip in hand. For a split second, you don't move, you don't react. Then he's in front of you, pressing a blood-slicked palm against your chest. "You wear the mask of devils," he hisses. "You protect the damned." Before he can say more, another flagellant grabs him and drags him back into the fold. They disappear down the street, still chanting, the sound rising and falling like a fever dream. You look down. His handprint stains your cloak like a brand. You don't linger. There's no point. You turn away from the square and begin your rounds, though every house you visit still hums with the echoes of that chant. Even behind shuttered windows, the plague doesn't drown out faith, no matter how twisted. Your first patient is a widow in the fishmonger's quarter. She won't let you in at first. You have to speak through the door, convincing her softly, over the course of 20 minutes, that you're not one of them. Eventually she opens it, and you find her curled in a corner, her feet wrapped in rags, her breathing shallow. The air smells like dried herbs and spoiled milk. She tells you she hasn't eaten in 3 days, too afraid to go outside. They say if I open the door, the plague walks in, she murmurs. Or worse, something wearing the plague. You check her for signs, no lesions, no fever, just hunger, starvation in slow motion. You give her half a roll from your pouch and a cloth soaked in diluted wine. She thanks you through tears. You leave with her blessing. You don't tell her that blessings don't stop rats. Your second stop is different. Not a call for help, but an invitation. The manor on the hill is one of the few untouched by the city's rot. It belongs to a minor noble family, and their message reached you by courier the day before, sealed with wax and wrapped in silk. A consultation, it read, regarding preventative measures. You almost didn't go. But coin is coin, and curiosity is hard to ignore. Inside, it's like another world. Clean floors, warm hearths, candles glowing in every corner. The family greets you wearing perfumes and silks, offering spiced wine and fruit like it's a banquet, not a quarantine. You decline the wine, accept the fruit, and follow the patriarch into a drawing room that smells of lavender and lemon. "We've heard," he says, sipping delicately, "that blood rituals can purify the air. What's your opinion?" You raise an eyebrow behind the mask. He's serious. He explains that he's hired a private alchemist, a foreign man dressed in red robes, who now advises the household. The alchemist enters the room shortly after, carrying a vial of something thick and dark. He claims it's goat's blood infused with copper and sage. He wants to hang vials of it at every entrance. You say nothing for a long moment, then you suggest opening a window. The noble doesn't like that answer. You leave shortly after, tucking the unused fruit into your satchel, unsure if you've just been to a consultation or a séance. You write in your ledger, "Wealth buys fantasy." By afternoon, the city has grown eerily quiet. The flagellants are gone, but their presence lingers. You notice more people praying aloud, kneeling in doorways, burning old clothes. One man sprinkles ash in a circle around his home and glares at you when you pass, as if your mask offends his faith. A boy approaches you on your way back. He can't be older than 10, barefoot, holding a scroll in both hands like a sacred relic. He offers it to you wordlessly, then runs off. The parchment is rough, the ink smudged, but you recognise it immediately. It's one of the flagellant chants. Latin phrases scrawled hastily, instructions for repentance and punishment. Someone is copying them and distributing them through the city. You roll it up and toss it in the nearest gutter. That evening, you retreat to your room and peel off your gear slowly, your joints stiff, your head pounding. You sit at your desk in silence, staring at the blank page for longer than usual. When you finally write, it comes quickly, as if the words are desperate to escape you. You write about the chant. The boy with the scroll, the alchemist and his vials of blood, the woman starving in silence, the touch of the flagellant on your chest, his handprint still faintly visible, even after you scrubbed. You write, they believe pain is the cure. You underline it. Then you add, and they might be right. You close the book. You lie back in your cot and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. For chants, for whips, for the sound of bare feet slapping the stone in the dark. There's a knock on your door before the sun has cleared the rooftops. Not the frantic kind that means a fever has broken, or a child has collapsed, but a measured, deliberate knock. Someone with authority, or someone pretending to have it. You pull your robe tighter, still stiff from yesterday's sweat, and open the door to find a liveried messenger, unusually clean for this hour of morning. He doesn't speak, just hands you a folded parchment with a green wax seal and steps back, waiting. You break the seal and read quickly, a summons to the manor at the eastern wall, a noble house, wealthy, enclosed, untouched, at least until now. You've been dreading this day. The plague always finds its way in eventually, no matter how high the gates or how expensive the perfume. You nod once at the messenger, who turns and walks off without a word, his boots barely making a sound on the wet stone. You arrive just after dawn. The manor is walled with granite and ivy, built more like a fortress than a home. Guards open the gate with a wary glance at your mask and wave you through. Inside, the grounds are immaculate, hedges trimmed, fountains still flowing, roses in bloom like the rest of the city hasn't been coughing blood for weeks. But the illusion doesn't hold, not for long. A servant leads you through a long corridor lined with tapestries that show old battles and saintly miracles. The scent of incense is thick in the air, too thick, as if trying to drown something else. You're brought to a chamber with high windows and dark velvet drapes. A small fire crackles in the hearth. On the bed lies a young woman, barely 20, curled beneath a mountain of embroidered blankets. Her skin is pale, her eyes sunken. Her hands tremble as she clutches a silver cross. She's beautiful in that fragile, painted way nobles often are, like someone preserved in time rather than alive in it. You kneel beside the bed and begin your examination. Her breath is shallow, her lips are tinged with blue. She doesn't speak, but her eyes flit toward yours. You place a cloth over her forehead, feel the fever radiating through it like sunlight. You ask for a basin of water and your kit. The servant nods, rushes out. As you wait, you hear muffled voices outside the door. Argument. A man's voice, deep, clipped, commanding. You catch a few words. No one enters, contaminated. She's all that matters, then silence. When the servant returns, he's visibly shaken. You work quickly. You administer a vinegar tincture, rub her hands with rosemary oil, arrange her pillows to help her breathe. But none of it is a cure. You know that. So does she. Still, you move through the motions because that's what you do. You've become a specialist in the theatre of hope. Afterward, you speak with the head of the household, a nobleman with a voice like iron and eyes that don't blink enough. He asks what's wrong with her, and you give him the standard answer. It's the plague, the slow kind. He clenches his jaw, says nothing for a long time, then finally says, "You'll stay until she recovers." You don't correct him. They give you a guest chamber, lavish, with a canopied bed and a fireplace that smells like orange peel. You try not to enjoy it, but after weeks of straw mats and smoke-choked cellars, it feels surreal to sit somewhere quiet, clean, and warm. Still, you don't unpack, you don't remove the mask. You just sit beside the window, watching the garden below as peacocks wander aimlessly across the lawn. You return to the young woman's side throughout the day. She doesn't speak, but sometimes her fingers move slightly when you place your hand over hers. You change her linens. You burn herbs near the bed. At one point, a priest enters to administer last rites, but the nobleman forbids it. "Not yet," he growls. "She's not leaving us." There's a moment later in the afternoon when she looks directly at you, her eyes sharp, alert for the first time. She raises one finger, trembling, and touches the tip of your mask. You sit still, unsure what she's trying to say. Then she whispers, barely audible, "Bird." You nod once. She closes her eyes again. You've read stories of nobles during past outbreaks walling themselves inside their estates with food, wine, and servants, convinced that isolation, wealth, and faith would shield them. It rarely worked. Disease finds the cracks. Always. There's a famous case from Florence, where an entire estate was buried within a week, despite hiring 2 doctors, 3 priests, and a philosopher who claimed to have bottled sunlight. That bottle did not help. As the sun begins to dip, you're called to a second room in the manor. An old woman, possibly the matron, sitting in a high-backed chair beside a dead fireplace. She refuses to lie down. Her face is sharp, her gaze even sharper. "You're the one with the mask," she says. "I've seen paintings of your kind. Death's crow." You say nothing. She coughs once daintily into a lace handkerchief. When she pulls it away, there's blood. She sees it. Doesn't react. "How long?" she asks. 2 days, you say, maybe 3, she nods. That's long enough to make peace. Then she stands, walks slowly to the fire, and throws the bloody cloth into the grate. "We used to bury our dead under stained glass," she murmurs. "Now we stack them like firewood. The world's made a mockery of tradition." You don't argue. That evening, as the manor dims and the lamps are lit, you return once more to the young woman's bedside. She's weaker now, her breath a whisper, but her eyes still open when you speak her name. You take her hand in yours, gloved and trembling, and tell her something meaningless. A lullaby your mother used to hum. A string of nonsense syllables. She listens, or at least you pretend she does. Back in your room, you write by candlelight. The girl in the bed, the matron with the bloody handkerchief, the silence of wealth, and the futility of control. You write, "The plague does not respect walls." You draw a tiny crown, then cross it out. You're not asked to leave that night. You sleep in the canopied bed, the scent of roses drifting in from the garden. It's the softest place you've rested since arriving in the city. You lie still, listening to the hush of fabric and fire. Somewhere down the hall, someone coughs, once, then again. You do not dream. You wake in silk sheets, which feels wrong. Not just unfamiliar, but offensive, like you've fallen asleep in someone else's fantasy. The pillow beneath your head is too soft. The room smells like roses and clean linen, not rotten, damp stone. For a moment you wonder if you've died. If this is some oddly tailored heaven designed just for you. But then you sit up and your back cracks, and your skin itches from the dried sweat beneath your robe, and you remember the manor, the girl, the plague hiding beneath velvet. You dress quickly. The mask goes on last, as always, its straps pulled tight enough to leave faint indentations along your jaw. You check your satchel, restock a few herbs from the bundle left at your door by some too polite servant, and return to the young woman's room before anyone can ask where you've gone. You find her asleep, breath shallow, limbs limp. A nursemaid dozes in a chair nearby, her head slumped forward. You don't wake her. You move through your routine. New cloths, fresh rose water, a pinch of myrrh in the brazier to disguise the rising scent of fever. Her temperature is higher today. The blueness in her lips has deepened. You hum softly while you work, not for her but for yourself. A melody without words. Something to hold the silence together. Then the alchemist enters. You've heard of him by now, whispered about in the halls. His name is Eustache, though he prefers Master of Elements. He wears a red robe cinched at the waist with a leather belt festooned with pouches and glass vials. His beard is streaked with copper, possibly dyed, and his hands are always stained. Ashes, soot, oil. He greets you with a sweeping bow, as if you're both performers in some macabre pageant. "Ah, the bird of death," he says with a grin. "May I offer a supplement to your methods?" You sigh, nod once. He steps to the bedside, uncorks a small bottle, and pours 3 drops of a dark, syrupy liquid onto the young woman's tongue. It smells of licorice and iron. "Elixir of mercury and powdered garnet," he says proudly, "to cool the blood and invigorate the spirit." You make a note of it in your ledger, but your handwriting tilts slightly. You don't believe in garnet elixirs, and you doubt mercury has ever invigorated anything except a swift demise. Still, you let him do it, because the nobleman trusts him, and because you're a guest here, and because what else is there to try? Afterward, he invites you to his workshop in the West Wing. You accept. Curiosity, if nothing else. It's a dim room, filled with strange scents and stranger contraptions, glass tubes coiled like worms, iron cauldrons bubbling over with greenish froth, scrolls scattered across every surface, some ancient, others freshly inked. You stash gestures to a chalkboard where he's drawn a diagram of the human body overlaid with symbols from astrology and the old humours. "You see," he says, tapping the drawing, "the plague attacks not only the body but the alignment of the heavens. Mars and Saturn are in conjunction. Naturally blood boils." You nod slowly. You've heard worse. He pulls open a drawer and shows you his newest creation, a tonic made from crushed opals, horse bile, and the ash of a murdered crow. "It needs time to settle," he says reverently. You ask what it's supposed to do. "Unbind the soul from the rot," he replies. You leave soon after, your mask filtering the sour smell of boiling pitch as you walk back down the corridor. You pass a servant polishing brass candlesticks, and a small boy reciting prayers under his breath, eyes darting toward each closed door as if waiting for one to open and reveal a corpse. Later you're summoned to the matron again. She's still seated by the fire, still pale, but now with a different kind of urgency in her eyes. "They won't admit she's dying," she says flatly, "but she is." You nod. She sips wine from a crystal goblet. "They think prayers will hold back death. That incense will cover the scent." Her laugh is dry. "They've never been poor. They've never seen what real death looks like." You ask her if she's afraid. She shakes her head. "I've outlived 3 husbands, 2 sons, and 4 plagues. I'm tired, doctor, but I'm not afraid." That afternoon the girl worsens. Her breathing comes in gasps. Her skin has taken on a sickly sheen, like wax left in the sun. You administer laudanum to ease the pain and hold her hand while she trembles. Her eyes open once, find yours, and then drift shut. The nursemaid weeps quietly in the corner. When the nobleman arrives, you give him the facts. Her body is failing. The garnet and mercury have done nothing. He grows silent, then angry, then silent again. He storms from the room, muttering about bringing in priests, soldiers, anyone who can help. You wonder if he'll try to buy her life with gold. If only it were that easy. You step outside for air, wandering the manicured garden in the fading light. The roses are wilting now, petals drooping, their scent cloying. You sit on a stone bench and stare at a statue of a weeping angel whose face has been worn smooth by time. A servant brings you a cup of broth. You thank her, even though it tastes like water and salt. She asks if the girl will live. You don't answer. You stay the night again, not by choice, but because you can't leave her like this. You sit by her bed as she slips in and out of consciousness, her breath rattling like wind through a broken flute. You think of your earliest patients, peasants, merchants, orphans, and how their deaths, though equally tragic, never drew such ceremony. Here, everything is velvet and gold and perfume. But death does not care. It arrives the same way. In the dark hours she stirs, opens her eyes, whispers one word, "Sing." You hesitate. Then, beneath your breath, behind your mask, you do. A hymn you barely remember. The same melody your mother sang when fever took your sister, a song that belongs to no one anymore. When it's over, she sleeps again. You don't. At dawn, you write. You record the alchemist's tonics, the matron's indifference, the nobleman's fury, the girl's whisper. The garden's silence. You draw a flower drooping in a cup, petals falling like drops of blood. Then you write, "Even velvet rots." You sit in the chair beside her bed until the morning birds begin to sing. Her breath is barely there, but it's still there, for now. She dies just after sunrise. You're still by her side when it happens. There's no dramatic gasp, no final cry, no angelic light spilling through the windows. Just a slow exhale, a loosening of the shoulders, a stillness that spreads across her body like ice on a pond. Her eyes remain closed. Her hand, limp in yours, twitches once, then falls still. You stay seated for a long moment, not because you're unsure what to do, but because you know exactly what happens next, and you want to delay it, if only for a minute. The nursemaid realizes first, stifling a sob into her sleeve. The silence spreads like fire. Out the door, down the hall, through the manor, you hear footsteps, muffled orders, voices raised behind doors. You let go of the girl's hand, fold it gently over her chest, and pull the sheet up to her chin. The nobleman arrives within minutes, storming into the room with 2 guards behind him. He takes one look at her and stumbles, gripping the bedpost as if someone has struck him. He doesn't cry. He just stares, his face a mask of disbelief, as though he'd imagined her too noble to die. "She was the last," he says finally, "the last of my line." You don't reply. You stand quietly and wait for him to speak again. Instead, he turns and leaves the room. You expect to be dismissed immediately. Instead, a servant appears with instructions. You are to prepare her body for burial. "Properly," the servant says, eyes flicking toward your mask. "With care. He wants her ready by nightfall." You've done this before, many times, but it never feels like routine. You clean her gently with wine and lavender water. You comb her hair, braid it into a simple coil, and tuck rosemary sprigs into the folds. Her skin has cooled quickly, another sign of how far gone she truly was before they even summoned you. You wrap her in linen, tight and neat, and place a rosary in her hands. Then you seal the room and leave a note on the door. Contagion risk. Entry forbidden. In the hallway you see Eustache pacing, muttering to himself, his red robe streaked with soot. When he sees you, he narrows his eyes. "It wasn't the plague," he says flatly. "It was her humours. Imbalanced. I told him not to mix the oils. Someone interfered." You say nothing. You're tired of arguing with men who believe in magic but not science. You push past him and make your way to the garden, needing air. Outside, the roses have finally begun to fall apart. Petals scatter like crimson confetti along the paths. The fountain gurgles quietly, its water tinged pink from iron build-up. A servant is already building a pyre in the far corner, discreetly behind a hedge, but it's clear what it's for. No tomb, no marble, just fire. You wonder if the nobleman knows, or if he'll pretend she was buried in silken hymns, somewhere the city can never find her. By midday, you're ready to leave. You don't ask for payment, you don't wait for farewell. You simply gather your things, bow stiffly to the servant who walks you to the gate, and step back into the city. The contrast is jarring. Outside, the real world is still crumbling. Streets are smeared with mud and soot. A donkey brays near a collapsed wall. Someone's crying 2 doors down, but you don't stop. You feel the weight of the manor pressing on your shoulders like wet stone. The air smells worse here, closer, more human. You breathe deeply anyway. Better the stench of the dying than the perfume of the deluded. You walk until the buildings thin and the noise dulls, and eventually you find yourself near the old bathhouse, long closed, now repurposed as a makeshift storage space for corpses awaiting burial. The doors are ajar. Inside, it's cold and damp, the tiled floor slick with condensation. Bodies are wrapped in linen and stacked along the walls, labelled in charcoal with names or numbers or nothing at all. A man waits there. You know him by his coat, once fine, now moth-bitten and caked in dust. He's a physician, though the way he slouches you'd think he was just another mourner. He greets you with a tired smile. "I was wondering when you'd show." You sit beside him on a cracked bench, and for a while you don't talk. You just listen to the silence, the sound of dripping water and the occasional creak from overhead. "Have you noticed the changes?" he says eventually. "The symptoms. They're not consistent anymore. I had a patient who died in hours. No swelling, just collapse. Another who carried it for weeks and never showed a sign. And the dreams." You glance over. "What dreams?" he hesitates. Then, "People say they see her. A woman. Not death. Not a ghost. Something else. Dressed in black, mouth full of ash. They see her before they die." You pause. You remember the man who described the plague with a face, the chant written on the wall, "Don't listen to the bell," the child who drew an eye. You wonder if all of it is beginning to connect, or if your mind is cracking from too many deaths. I don't believe in curses, you say. Neither did I, he replies. But I keep waking up with ash on my tongue. You don't reply. Instead, you help him move a few of the wrapped bodies into the corner. There's a rhythm to it now. Bend, lift, place. Bend, lift, place. You don't ask who they were. You don't want to know. Before you leave, he hands you a small bundle, dried sage, clove, and something bitter-smelling. Burn it before bed, he says, just in case the dreams come. You take it without comment. That evening, back in your quarters, you don't burn the herbs, you just sit by the window and stare out at the street now hushed and empty. A dog trots by, thin and alert. Somewhere a door slams. The bells do not ring tonight. You write again. You record the girl's death, the alchemist's mutterings, the ashwoman from the dreams, the fellow physician who looks more like a mourner than a man of medicine. You draw a black figure with a mouth like smoke, no eyes, no face. You write, death has become imaginative. You pause. Then add, or maybe we've just run out of names. You set down the pen and press your forehead against the cool window pane. You watch your breath fog the glass. For the first time in weeks, you think, maybe it's time to leave. Maybe there's nothing left here for a doctor to save. And then you hear it, just once. A bell, ringing faintly, far off, where there should be no bell at all. You don't move for a full minute, just sit at the window, the cool glass pressed to your masked face. Frozen by that distant sound, one solitary bell tolling where no bell should be. It doesn't echo like the death knells from the cathedral towers. No, this one is deeper, slower, like it's been pulled up from under the earth itself. You strain to hear more, but there's only silence after, not even footsteps, not even wind. You write nothing that night. You blow out the candle and lie flat on your cot staring at the ceiling. The herb bundle your colleague gave you still sits untouched on the table. You think about burning it now just to prove you don't need it, but you don't move, and when sleep finally arrives, it doesn't come gently. In your dream, you are standing at the gates of the city, but the gates are gone. The towers are crumbling, and the sky has turned black, not with storm or smoke, but with something heavier, like a curtain pulled across the world. You walk through the ruins alone, and every door you pass has the eye symbol carved into it. Some are still bleeding. Then you see her, a figure in black, face hidden behind a veil, mouth stretched wide as if in song or scream. You can't tell. Her hands are slick with oil, and she points not at you but at the city behind you, like she's counting the dead. You try to speak, but your voice is ash. You wake coughing. Morning light pushes weakly through the shutters. The cough fades. You sit up slowly, wipe sweat from your brow, and stare at the satchel near the foot of your cot. It smells faintly of the manor's perfume now, soaked into the fabric from that long night. You shake your head, grab your mask, and prepare for another day. The first patient is already waiting at the door, a baker's assistant shaking with fever but still lucid. She tells you she's been hiding her illness for 3 days because she didn't want to stop working. The bread won't bake itself, she says with a brittle laugh, and her breath smells like spoiled milk and burnt flour. You help her lie down, examine her under the lamplight and realise she's already halfway gone. You wrap her hand in linen and tell her she's brave. You don't say she's doomed. The second house belongs to a man who claims he's been cured. Touched by God, he says, grinning from behind a barricade of overturned furniture. You ask what he means. He says the fever burned through him in a single night, and now he's clean. You ask to see his skin. He peels off his shirt and shows you arms covered in blisters, still raw, still leaking. You ask about the smell. He doesn't seem to notice it. God is cleansing me, he whispers. You leave him a sachet of herbs and a warning. If the swelling reaches your throat, call someone. He nods like he's humouring you, then bolts the door before you're even off the porch. In the afternoon, you visit a hospice run by nuns, where the air smells like incense and lye. One of the sisters greets you with hands folded, face calm but red-rimmed. We've lost 5 today, she says. We've covered them, but no one has time to carry them out. You follow her through a narrow hallway where candles flicker in the shadows. You hear prayers whispered from behind curtains, and once someone sobbing uncontrollably, while a hymn plays just loud enough to compete. She brings you to a small room in the back where the 5 dead lie wrapped in white cloth, heads covered, feet exposed. You kneel beside them and begin your notes. Each one is similar. Standard symptoms, rapid progression. But one stands out. A woman, perhaps 50, with strange markings across her legs, dark splotches not caused by bruising or infection, but by what looks like ink. Intricate shapes drawn just beneath the skin, like old tattoos trying to claw their way back to the surface. You ask the sister if she knows who she was. A traveller, she says, never gave a name. Said she came from the west. You copy the shapes into your ledger. One resembles a closed eye, another, a tower with smoke curling from its top. The rest are too faded to decipher. You don't ask if they'll be buried. You already know the answer. You leave the hospice and pass through the spice market, which now smells more of mildew than cardamom. A few stalls remain, mostly run by old women selling dust more than goods. One stops you. You're the doctor with the ledger, she says. You nod. She presses something into your hand, a single sprig of wolfsbane dried to a brittle curl. For the spirit that walks, she says. If you see her again, throw it at her feet. You don't ask how she knows. You just nod. Later, you're called to the city's edge, near the grave pits. A group of diggers has found something. Not normal, they say. You arrive to find them clustered around a partially uncovered corpse. It's old, weeks at least, but oddly preserved. The skin is blackened but not decayed. The eyes still open, the lips stretched into a grin. They say it wasn't here yesterday. You kneel, examine the body, and find another one just beneath it. Same condition. Then another, all clustered together as if they were buried alive, or climbed their way to the surface. One of the diggers swears he heard voices last night. Laughter, faint, echoing from under the soil. Another says he saw someone walking near the pit with bare feet and no shadow. You tell them to burn the bodies. They refuse. You burn them yourself. By the time the sun sets, you've visited 10 homes, 4 bodies, and 1 hospice. You've written pages of notes, drawn strange symbols, and pocketed the wolfsbane. Your boots are soaked through, your gloves are cracked, and your mask smells of death and sage. Back in your room, you finally light the herb bundle. The scent is sharp, earthy and strange, but not unpleasant. You hold it under your nose for a moment, watching the smoke curl. Then you sit at your desk and write. You write about the grinning corpses, the ink beneath the skin, the man who claimed to be cured, the bell that shouldn't exist, the figure in your dream. You write, there is something underneath this. Then you add, not just disease, something watching. You draw her again, woman-shaped, mouth wide, arms long. You leave her eyes blank. You close the ledger, lie down and stare at the ceiling again. This time, you're too afraid to sleep. You make it through the night without dreams, or maybe you dream and just can't remember. Either way, you wake in darkness, your candle burnt down to a stub, the room choked with the stale remnants of wolfsbane smoke. Your throat is dry. Your joints ache. The edges of your vision feel just a little too sharp, like the world's been carved into with a knife. You sit up slowly, stretch your limbs, and listen. No bells, no voices, no footsteps. Only the soft creak of wood and the whisper of wind through cracked mortar. The wolfsbane sits in a smouldering pile of ash on the floor. You sweep it into a dish and set it aside. No point in cleaning it up fully. There will be more. You already feel that in your bones. When you step outside, the street is quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The wrong kind. The kind where something has just happened or is about to. You see no one at first. Doors are closed, windows shuttered. A crow pecks lazily at something unidentifiable near a gutter and barely flinches when you pass. Your first stop is unplanned. A girl runs up to you barefoot, hair tangled, one eye swollen shut. They're all sleeping, she says breathlessly, but they won't wake up. You follow her across 2 alleyways and a back garden, where laundry hangs limp in the still air. She leads you into a home with no door. Inside, it smells like mould and vinegar and something sweet that shouldn't be there. There are 3 people in the main room, her parents and an older brother, all lying on the floor, eyes closed, chests rising slowly. Not dead, not feverish, but completely unresponsive. You check their pulses, all strong, no sweating, no lesions, just stillness, as if they've stepped too far into sleep and can't find their way back out. The girl clutches your sleeve. They were fine last night. They just didn't wake up. You examine them again, closer this time. Their mouths are slightly open, and their eyelids twitch faintly. One of them murmurs something barely audible. You lean in. It sounds like counting. You leave them with cloth soaked in peppermint oil and ask the girl to keep the windows open. If anything changes, you tell her, run. She nods, serious in a way children shouldn't have to be. Your second visit is to a man who claims to have seen an angel. He meets you on his knees in the middle of a muddy courtyard, hands bleeding from pressing them into frozen earth. She came to me, he says, last night, in smoke. Her hair was fire, her eyes. She didn't have any. You kneel beside him and ask him what she said. Nothing, he whispers. She pointed at my heart, then left. You check his chest, no markings. But his heart rate is erratic. You ask if he's had fever. He nods once. Yesterday, gone now. You give him a sprig of thyme and write in your ledger, delirium, or something worse. Then you underline it. Later break. You're summoned to the cloth merchant's district where a home has collapsed overnight. Not from fire, not from violence, just rot. The wood crumbled, the beams gave way, a family of 6 inside, 3 survived, 2 missing, 1 too mangled to move. You step carefully through the wreckage, offering what aid you can, but your mind keeps drifting. You kneel near a hole in the floor where the youngest child might have fallen through, and for a moment you feel something strange, a pull. Not physical, not even emotional, but a sensation in the back of your skull like you're being watched from beneath the boards. You reach for your lantern, shine it down the crack. Nothing, just mud and silence. But your breath won't come back right until you're far from the ruins. That afternoon you visit a woman you treated weeks ago. A mild case. She recovered quickly, and you marked her as safe. But now she's relapsed. Her fever is worse. Her skin covered in black veins you don't remember seeing before. Her husband says she started laughing in her sleep, speaking words he couldn't understand. You examine her closely. Her lips are cracked. Her fingers twitch. You place a cloth on her head, and she whispers something to you, breathless. It's under the well. You ask her what that means. She doesn't respond. You leave her with poppy syrup and a vial of rosemary oil and walk home faster than usual. The well she spoke of is not far from your quarters, an old stone thing, dry most of the year, half collapsed. You pass it often. You've never looked into it. Not really. That changes tonight. You wait until sundown, until the street's quiet again, until the silence returns. Then you light your lantern and go. The well sits in a courtyard between 3 buildings, shadowed by ivy and blackened wood. You approach slowly, heart racing, not because of the danger, but because of the possibility. That something might be there, that the whispers might have meant something all along. You peer over the edge, nothing at first. Then, just as you turn to leave, you hear a noise, faint, like a breath being drawn through wet stone. Then a whisper, a language you don't recognize, 3 syllables repeated. You lean in further, straining to hear. Your lantern flickers, and then movement, a flicker of something far below. Too fast to describe, but it's enough. You pull back sharply, nearly stumbling, and back away from the well. Your heart pounds so loudly it echoes in your mask. You stand there for a long time, staring into the darkness, daring it to move again. It doesn't, but the whisper doesn't stop. You retreat to your room in near silence. You lock the door, you pull the shutter closed. You light every candle you own. Then you sit down and write with shaking hands. You write, "The well is not dry." You draw the stones, the flicker, the shape you think you saw. You write the syllables phonetically as best as you can remember them. Tsar-ha-ren. You don't know if it's real. You don't know if it was ever meant for you, but you can still hear it. At the bottom of the page you write one more thing. I am starting to believe the plague has a voice. The next morning you're slow to rise. You've slept little, barely more than a few snatches of rest here and there, drifting in and out of half-conscious dread. Each time you closed your eyes, you felt like you were standing at the edge of the well again, its cold breath fogging your mask. You kept hearing that word, Tsar-ha-ren. It had no meaning you could find in your memory or any book you've studied, and yet it scratches against the inside of your skull like it's always been there, waiting to be remembered. When you finally push yourself upright, you notice something strange. The air in your room smells faintly of wet stone and sulphur, despite the window having remained closed all night. You check the walls, the corners, the space beneath the cot. Nothing. Just your imagination, perhaps, or something worse. You dress mechanically, hands stiff, muscles reluctant. The mask goes on last, the beak feeling heavier than usual. You step outside to find the streets eerily normal. After days of decaying quiet, people are suddenly moving again. Vendors calling half-heartedly from behind makeshift stalls. Children chasing one another with sticks, and an old man playing a flute on the church steps. Badly, but with enthusiasm. But the cheer is strained. Beneath it there's something artificial, like a play being acted out for a very specific audience. You stop by a merchant's cart and hear someone say, "It's passing, finally. The heat has driven it out." Another chimes in, "God heard us. It's over." You hear this word again and again as you walk. Over. It's not over. You know that much. The numbers haven't gone down. The fever hasn't slowed. You marked 6 new deaths in your ledger yesterday alone, and that was just in the North Quarter. But the city has decided to pretend. Or perhaps, more terrifyingly, it's forgotten. Your first visit of the day is a man who insists he's recovered. You examine him, and indeed his symptoms have faded. No swelling, skin clearing, breath steady. But his eyes twitch when you ask him questions. He flinches at loud sounds. And when you mention the well, just as a test, he stiffens. He leans in close, too close, and whispers, "She's walking now." You freeze. "Who?" you ask. He doesn't respond. He just smiles and opens his mouth wide, unnaturally wide, showing you a black smudge where his tongue should be. It looks burned, cauterized. You pull back instinctively. He keeps smiling. You don't linger. Your next stop is a makeshift school. The city, in its denial, has ordered several public spaces reopened, and a group of children now sit in the nave of a small, crumbling chapel. They draw with charcoal on pieces of fabric stretched over broken chairs. Most of the drawings are innocent. Dogs, suns, stick figures holding hands, but 2 drawings catch your attention. One is of a well, surrounded by crooked shapes with no eyes. The other is of a woman with long arms and no mouth, her fingers reaching for a crowd of tiny people below. She has no face. Just that symbol again, an eye, drawn sideways on her chest like a brand. You ask the child who drew it where she got the idea. She shrugs. "Saw her in a dream," she says simply. "She asked me to draw her." You nod slowly and leave. You pass a gathering in the square. A preacher stands on a crate preaching feverishly about cleansing fire and final harvests. "The sickness is not a test," he shouts. "It is a door, and not all who pass through it come back alone." The crowd listens. Most are tired. Their clothes worn thin, their expressions unreadable. Some nod. A few cry. One man in the back vomits into the gutter but doesn't leave. You feel like you're walking through a painting. Each person frozen in an emotion that doesn't quite match their surroundings. Laughter in one corner, silence in the next. A child spinning in circles while her mother weeps into a wall. When you return to your quarters to check on your herbs and supplies, you find something has been left for you. A bundle of dried black lilies, tied with red thread, placed neatly at the base of your door. You pick it up cautiously. Tucked inside is a scrap of parchment with 3 words written in a spidery hand. "She is coming." You do not take the bundle inside. Instead, you carry it to the bathhouse where the body stacks are kept. The same place you spoke to the other doctor, the one who told you about the dreams. But when you arrive, the doors are bolted shut. A notice nailed to the frame reads simply, "Condemned." You circle to the rear entrance and find it has been bricked in hastily, the mortar still wet. No one answers your knock. No one even peers out a window. The entire block is silent. You return to the well. Why? You're not sure. You feel compelled, like something about the air today is bending around it, like every road leads there no matter which you choose. You approach slowly, pausing by the mouth of the stone ring. The whispers are gone. But something's different. Carved into the stones now are dozens of little lines, scratches like someone ran a blade across the edge again and again, and between the scratches words, more of that unfamiliar language. You trace one with your gloved finger and it's warm, recently etched. You drop the lily bundle into the well without thinking, and then you leave. The final visit of the day is to a midwife you've known since your arrival, sharp, dependable, always grounded. She greets you with a forced smile. "I've been expecting you," she says. "It's my turn, isn't it?" You examine her. The marks are faint but there, behind her ears, along her collarbone. She speaks clearly, but there's something off, like her words are being chosen by someone else. You ask how she's feeling. She tilts her head. "Like something is knocking," she says. You sit with her for a while. You don't offer medicine. She doesn't ask for it. When you rise to leave, she says one last thing. You shouldn't stay. You return to your room at twilight. You lock the door. You push the table against it. You light every candle and scatter cloves across the floor. Then you write. You write about the children's drawings, the man with the missing tongue, the preacher who said the plague was a door, the midwife who heard knocking from within. You write. They've stopped fearing death because something worse has taken its place. You draw the well again, this time. You add fingers gripping the edge. At the bottom of the page you write a question. What crawls out when death gets bored? You don't sleep. You don't even try. You lose track of the days after that. Time folds in on itself like damp linen. Heavy, musty, impossible to smooth out. The morning air carries no scent of dew anymore, only smoke and spoiled meat, and even the sun seems reluctant to rise. You stop asking what day it is. You start marking time by symptoms, by corpses, by how long since your last normal conversation. You start wondering if you'll ever have one again. When the knock comes on your door, it's different this time. Not hesitant, not desperate, calm, even. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. You rise slowly, heart hammering in a rhythm that doesn't match your feet as they move across the floor. You open the door to find a familiar face, your apprentice, or what used to be your apprentice. He's thinner now, skin pulled tight across his cheekbones. His cloak hangs off him like it belongs to someone else. But it's his eyes that stop you, once bright and eager, now dull and too wide. The kind of stare that's seen too much too quickly and hasn't quite found the floor beneath it again. "I didn't know where else to go," he says. You bring him inside without a word. He sits in the corner near the hearth, back to the wall, as though even indoors he expects something to creep up behind him. You ask if he's sick. He shakes his head. No fever. Not yet. Not yet. You kneel beside him, inspect his arms, his neck, his tongue. Nothing visible. His breath is steady but shallow, like he's holding something in, or back. "I stayed to help a family near the Baker's Square," he says quietly. "They were coughing, so I brought herbs, cleaned their linens, the usual." "And?" you ask. "They all died within hours. Not one after the other, together, all at once, same moment." You stare at him. He goes on. "They were whispering before it happened. Same words. Didn't make sense, but I recognised one." He looks up at you then, the whites of his eyes glassy. Saharen. The word coils in the air between you like smoke. You don't ask how he learned it. You don't ask how he knew it was important. You simply stand and pace the room, trying to breathe through the tightness now growing in your chest. It feels like all the air has been replaced with dust. You sit him down with a warm cloth, give him diluted clove oil to sip, and tell him to rest. "If you feel fever," you say softly, "wake me." He doesn't argue. You don't sleep that night either. You sit in your chair, watching his chest rise and fall, your hand gripping your ledger like a weapon. You consider writing, but there's nothing you can put on the page that feels adequate anymore. The next morning you find him sitting upright, staring at the door. He doesn't remember falling asleep. You nod. Neither do you. You fix him a small bowl of broth and force him to eat, and when you feel certain he can stand, you let him follow you again. You walk side by side down a street that's more shadows than stone. The fog heavier today, thicker than ever before. Your breath forms clouds in front of your mask. His does not. You reach a home marked with a red cross and a scrawled phrase, "Stay out." It's her house now. Inside, you find no people. Just empty clothes laid out in rows on the floor, as if their owners had dissolved from inside them. There's no blood, no sign of violence, just clothing, arranged with care. At the centre, a single candle flickering. No windows are open. You didn't light it. You and your apprentice don't speak. On the next street you're called to another well. Not the one from before. This one is deeper, older, cracked and dry for generations. Or so you thought. Children gathered around it say they heard music. Not flutes, one girl tells you, strings. Like spiders pulling webs. You peer in, and you see water. Not just water, reflection. Your own face, but not. The mask is there, but it seems to breathe. The eye holes blink. You recoil, stumble back, and the children laugh. You don't. Your apprentice says nothing, but his hands shake. You walk through the rest of the day like ghosts, visible but untouched. No one speaks to you. The streets are thinning. More and more doors bear marks, not just crosses, but symbols scratched with nails. Knives, burned into wood. Eyes, mouths. One house has a single phrase painted across the stone. We dreamed her open. By dusk, your apprentice can't walk straight. You sit him on a bench and examine him again. His temperature has risen. Not much, but enough. His lips are cracked, and his pupils don't dilate properly when you shine a candle near his face. I hear her, he whispers. She's in the silence. You want to scream at him to stop. You want to tell him none of this is real, but you don't. You can't. You bring him back to your quarters, set him on the cot, bundle him in cloth, mix a small dose of laudanum and press it to his lips. He drinks, then sleeps. You sit on the floor beside him, knees pulled to your chest. At some point in the night you see her again. Not in a dream. In the corner of the room. She's not moving, not making a sound. Just standing there, a figure cloaked in darkness, face hidden beneath folds of shadow. Her arms are too long. Her hands are black and wet. You don't move. You don't blink. You don't breathe. She doesn't approach. She only points. First to your apprentice, then to you. Then vanishes. You spend the rest of the night staring into the space where she stood. Nothing stirs. The candles gutter, then die. You don't relight them. At dawn, your apprentice wakes, coughing. You rush to him, kneel beside him. He looks at you through cracked lips and says, "She said your name." You freeze. You've never told him your name. No one has in weeks. You sit back slowly, your own breath ragged. You realize you're sweating beneath the mask. Your hands are trembling. You rise, walk to your desk, open your ledger, and write for the first time in a day and a half. She knows me now. You underline it. Then you write, "There is no line left between doctor and victim." You draw the mask. This time, it's cracked down the centre. Inside the beak, a flower blooms, wilted, mouth-shaped. You don't know what it means, but you know what comes next. The next morning arrives with an unnatural hush. The city seems to hold its breath. Even the birds, usually so eager to sing over the decay, are silent. You wake slowly, limbs heavy, mind wrapped in fog. For a moment, you forget where you are. Then you see your apprentice, curled on the cot, soaked in sweat, lips parted, breath rattling like leaves in a dying breeze, and it all returns. You check him immediately. The swelling has begun behind his ears, faint but unmistakable. His hands twitch against the covers. His mouth moves in broken phrases, lips forming words without sound. When you lean in close, you catch fragments. She walks. She walks. I open the door. You sit back, pressing your gloved hands together to keep them from shaking. You knew this was coming. He must have been carrying it for days, perhaps even before he came to you. Perhaps that's why he came to you. Not for help, but for confession. Or for company. You go through the motions, the way you always do. Boil water, mix a tincture of thyme and dried cherry bark, burn rosemary in a clay bowl at his feet. It's not a cure, it never was. But it gives you something to do. A way to keep moving, even if the destination is already set in stone. Outside, the world continues in that eerie, echoing silence. No carts roll down the stone streets. No criers shout the day's death tolls. The city has gone still, as if everyone, all at once, realized there's nothing more to be said. You step into the street, leave your apprentice to sleep, and begin what you know may be your final round. The first house is open, door ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. You call inside, no answer. Within, a family lies in a perfect circle on the floor, each one with their hands folded across their chest. No signs of struggle, no bleeding, Just stillness. Like they laid down together and agreed to stop. You mark their door with a chalk cross and move on. Your second stop is the old gravedigger's shack near the southern pit. He's been your ally of sorts. Gruff, foul-mouthed but reliable. You find him sitting by the pit, shovel stuck in the soil beside him, staring into the chasm. You greet him, but he doesn't answer. You step closer and realise his chest isn't rising. His skin has turned grey. Rigor mortis hasn't yet set in. You kneel beside him, tilt his head gently, and that's when you see it. His eyes are missing, not gouged out, just gone. Clean and smooth beneath the lids like he was born without them. A single word is carved into the wood of the shovel's handle, scratched by shaking hands. Zaharen. You don't bring him back. There's nowhere left to bring him. You wander for hours after that. The city looks the same, but it isn't. Everything feels brittle, like reality has been stretched too thin over something waiting underneath. You see symbols etched into the walls, all too familiar now. Eyes, wells, mouths without teeth. You see people praying to nothing. You see others walking aimlessly, humming old songs without melody. You pass a chapel, where the doors hang open, candles flickering on a broken altar. A statue of the Virgin has been turned to face the wall. By mid-afternoon the sky darkens, not with storm but with ash. Flakes drift slowly from above, swirling in the air like snow, collecting on rooftops and shoulders. You lift your mask briefly and catch one on your tongue. It tastes like burnt linen and bitter cloves. When you return to your quarters, your apprentice is awake. He stares at the ceiling, eyes dry and glassy. She came, he says simply. She stood by the window and waited. She didn't knock. She just looked. You don't ask how long she stayed. You know. You kneel beside him and hold his hand. He doesn't react. His skin is cold now, but not dead. Not yet. You reach into your satchel and remove a vial of opium extract, strong, pure, uncut. You press a few drops between his lips. He swallows slowly. Will it stop the dreams? No, you whisper, but it'll make them quieter. He closes his eyes. You sit with him as twilight creeps in. Outside, the world grows stranger. You hear laughter where there should be mourning. A bell rings. Again, that same unnatural toll, low and slow and ancient. You see a figure at the corner of your street, standing still beneath a lamplight that should have burned out days ago, cloaked, watching, long arms at her sides. You don't run. Instead, you write. This time, your hand is steady. You write about your apprentice, the silent family, the eyeless gravedigger, the ash from the sky. You draw the bell tower from your dreams, cracked and leaning. You draw her again, faceless now, draped in smoke with a mask in her hand. Not yours, one that looks older, bone white. You write, I see her everywhere. And she sees me back. You stop and look at your hands, they're shaking again. You tear off your gloves, your fingertips are darkening. First blue, then purple, then black. The skin there feels numb, cold, but not painful. Not yet. You rise slowly and walk to the basin. Wash your hands. The water runs clean, then grey, then red. You dry them with a cloth and watch the colour return, briefly. Then you return to your desk and finish the page. She has marked me. You sign it. For the first time since this began, you write your full name at the bottom of the page. Not because you expect anyone to read it, but because names still matter. Because the ledger should have one. You sit back in the chair, fold your hands over your chest and close your eyes. Your breath is shallow, your chest aches, but you are calm, because you understand now. This wasn't a plague, it was a summoning, and she's almost finished calling. The candle burns low now, its tiny flame dancing in the draught seeping through the window frame. You sit perfectly still, the weight of the ledger on your lap, its final page still warm with ink. The room has grown impossibly quiet. Not even your apprentice stirs. He's slipped into that strange suspended breath between sleep and something more permanent. Outside, the ash keeps falling. It covers everything. Rooftops, cobblestones, faces turned skyward. A hush blanketing the world. You think of your first days here, when the mask felt like armour, when you still believed you might be part of the cure. Now it feels more like a costume, An old lie worn so long it grew skin. You tug it off slowly, setting it gently beside the ledger. Your face feels exposed, vulnerable, strangely cold, but real. You rise one final time and cross the room to the window. In the distance, past the winding streets and the crooked towers, you see the well. The original one. The one she crawled from, maybe. The one no one talks about anymore. There are people gathered around it now, silent and swaying, like they've forgotten everything except her name. The final bell rings, once, and everything stops. You take a breath, deep, calm, full of the strange air that now tastes faintly of rosemary and smoke. Your eyes close just for a moment. You feel her enter, not the room, you, and it's quiet. A stillness so complete it feels like peace. Or maybe that's what she wants it to feel like. You smile once, faintly, at the absurdity of it all. Then you pick up the ledger, place it on the shelf beside your cot and lie down. The mask stays off, and this time you let sleep come.